you, Councillors. I declare the ordinary meeting February 2022 open and call for apologies for this meeting. We have apologies from Councillor Whiteley and Councillor Van Elbon. Yes. I'm happy to move those apologies. Thank you, Councillor Kinsey. Seconded, Councillor Taylor. No need for any further discussion. There, we'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Moving on to the minutes of the January meeting held on the 11th of January. Someone happy to move those minutes to an active record? Councillor Jackson happy to move those. Seconded, Councillor Jackson. Anything more? Sorry, I wasn't looking up.
Oh yeah, no, sorry, yeah, no.
Thank you. Any questions, comments relating to those minutes of the January ordinary meeting? Being nothing further, we'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. There have been some disclosures of interest, 3 of those, and they will be noted when we come to the appropriate section in the business paper. And thank you for those councillors who've undertaken that responsibility.
I'll read them out again if you want to. You happy with that, or you're right?
Sorry?
I'll read them out again if you want me to, or is it right?
I think it's probably good to record that, if you wouldn't mind, General Manager, just so that we've got a record of it beyond the paper record.
Thank you. Councillor Sarah Derrick's declaration of interest relates to item 3 of the Works Progress Support Finance Administration Projects report of the Divisional Manager of Finance Administration. With regards to the Council Chambers Administration Building Improvements, it's a non-pecuniary, her husband is BRD Design and Construction has been primarily responsible for detailing these works to date. Councillor Ron Higgins is in relation to the committee that hold closed council meeting, construction of council houses, Deacon Drive and Deacon Drive, item 5. It's a pecuniary interest. He's had dealings with Nearly Constructions, which is Wakanda Homes, as a contract plumber, and is still owed money by them. It's a non-pecuniary relation report and managed health and development. Item 3, which is the DA for the fruit and veg and grocery store. He owns a similar business in town and good rise to conflict of interest and duty as a councillor.
Thank you. We don't need to move those, is it? General Manager, Tony, just noted. No, thank you very much. Moving on to item 5, there are no mayoral minutes.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'll repeat that when we get into the committee of the whole for Councillor Higgins.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5 of our agenda, the mayoral minutes. There are no mayoral minutes. Item 6, we move on to the reports of the committees. The first of those being the first of committee meetings. The first of those was held on Tuesday, the 25th of January. Looking for a mover and a seconder for that report. Thank you, Councillor Walker. Seconded, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, there were 2 meetings, Tuesday the 25th and Tuesday the 8th, because there's a very tight time span for all of this to get decided, and then for the artists to be able to finish it off end of June, which is when the money needs to be expended and used. So there's been lots of changes, and I think everybody, thank you to the manager, engineering services, for giving us the latest edition, I hope, of what the changes have been, and also the latest of what's going on there next time silo. So we went through each one in the committee on both meetings, and the discussions, and there were changes. And I suppose it's now up to, it has to go on public exhibition, and for the public to see these and to see if you're happy with them. And also there has been a change to the church building. A mural will be done by Mr. Bruce Lynch, this day, and so that meant that we could actually a mural on Jacob Cotton's Cafe, which is in, God, it's fantastic. So really, if there's any questions, please, but yeah, it's, has to sort of keep moving along so that it gets done, but that's what we've come up with at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. General Manager. I wonder if we could just ask Raymond, Divisional Manager, Engineering Services, for an update on other changes to the content in these pictures, or the latest that he can tell us about that.
Yes, there are a few changes, unfortunately, for the Federal Theatre, the movie posters. At the moment, one of the posters is the original Star Wars poster from 1977. The Disney own the rights to that and have declined permission for us to use that. So that will have to be removed from there. I have also made many attempts via emails and websites to contact the copyright owners of every other poster, and to date I haven't received any responses. I've spoken with the artist and asked him to come up with some alternate options to utilise. Some of the thoughts that I had discussed with the artist were an old picture, a projector, movie reels. In conversation with a local resident, I found out that the debutante balls used to be held there, and also live theatre. So we may be able to pull a couple of ideas from some of those to replace some or all of the posters if we are unsuccessful in getting the required permission. If we don't hear from the companies and we don't get a response, we have to assume that we do not have approval. When I read all of the legislation, not being able to obtain approval or not is not, and then going ahead and doing it is not an accepted outcome. So that's where we stand with the Federal Theatre. As Councillor Walker has already said, we hope to remove the Presbyterian Church, the buildings murals, and replace it with the column of theme on JC Cafe. So true. In discussions yesterday, informal discussions, there was a request to try and beef up the cotton. So I will ask the artist to add a little bit more to the top of it to improve that, and see if we can also change the tractor that's in the wheat field to a more appropriate or a more looking item.
I also forgot to mention the painting that I think it's Mary Kennedy's going to do on in Howe Street, so the building, which will be a modern children's theme, but she's going away, so she will supply the paint, and when she comes back she can do that painting whenever. And also the Aboriginal Lands Council has a mural that they've decided that they will do.
I'm not aware of that one.
What happened, that was discussed at the time, and they're quite happy to have someone do a mural on the
I haven't spoken with the CEO of the Land Council as yet, I'm afraid. I'm sorry. I have spoken with Mary Kennedy and about the supply of the paint, and yes, she was working on some themes with her children for when she comes back. She hasn't decided exactly what to do. It will be, in her words, will be something simple and something easy, but they will provide a draft prior to a final decision. And so yes, I do need to still have a chat with the local land council to see, because the last report I had received from the Public Arts Committee, which unfortunately I wasn't at, was that they weren't prepared to take the funds because they didn't have an appropriate artist available to do the job.
I know we haven't got a copy in front of us here of the Foxy Park toilet block, of what's proposed on that. Not on my copy.
My apologies.
Everyone else has one, do they? No.
You don't have the Oxford Park?
No.
I will have a copy for you before the end of the.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll get that cleared up and we'll have those during the morning tea break, at least have those done so we can have a look. Councillor Walker, so we'll defer any further comments perhaps to the next meeting of the Public Arts Committee. Is that appropriate? Yes, and then we can have a final idea of where we need to go, given the comments here that the committee been hearing for action about tidying up a couple of more of the areas. So any further discussion on the first meeting of the Warren Public Arts Committee, held on that one on the 25th of January? No further discussion, put that, all those in favour, against, carried. Moving on to item 2 of the reports to committees, that being the Community Local Emergency Management Committee, Tuesday the 8th of February. Someone happy to move those minutes? Councillor Drews, second. Councillor Walker. Councillor Drews.
No, I've got no further comments at the moment. Thank you.
You have a question, comment?
I noticed 5 or 6 lessons learned from November, December. They're talking about utilisation of a helicopter during the future floods that can be beneficial for road inspection, checking for livestock in distress. I know for us in past floods, getting a chopper to help the livestock in distress has been very difficult, and waiting. The time of waiting, which can be very stressful also. I'm just wondering if there was a helicopter that was going to be specifically for this area, or was that discussed or decided?
The land services did utilise the helicopter a number of times for mostly the further down. Further down the river. It was available.
I know it was available. There was a time thing which, given the circumstances, they kind of a very stressful event for they can't be everywhere.
No, we only did one reconnaissance flight, and that was reasonably hard to organise. But I'm just pleased that the controller and myself were able to get up and have a look and have a little bit of an understanding. It's hard to. You need 2 or 3 to actually really seriously orientate yourself to have an understanding of what you're looking at, but we're pleased to just get one in. I was aware that for a while there was some slowness of some help downstream, but then they were able to help people and heard nothing more about people being concerned about that.
Gentlemen, was there much comment? I think the closing of the Oxley Highway caused a degree of angst when we, the council, weren't aware of it. It happened in an overnight situation in the middle of the harvest when people were trying to move machinery, etc. Has there been any indication that the Warren Shire Council be alerted if there's a possibility of the Oxley Highway being closed? And the second one is, how do you work towards the betterment of that particular piece of road just south of the Gillamar Bridge, in that it happens, or has happened, in every flood in recent times, and it's something that hits at once and it'll be overcome, but at the moment it's just an ongoing problem.
The second one we're certainly using as an example to the Minister for Emergency Services and Resilience to say, start funding some betterment programs. Here's an example. Causeway 1990, 1998, 2000, 2010, 2016 and now 2021 that's been blown out completely. If there'd been a concrete causeway after 1990, we would have had not the same damage and probably less access problems. We're certainly using that to Transport New South Wales and saying that the intricacies of access to Warren Shire has more experience and is a contractor and trying to keep that highway open as a contractor than others. So it will be used as one of the many reasons to try to get us to take over the RFCC. Sadly, Transport for New South Wales were an apology to that LNMC. But it was talked about that that's one of the areas that we're actually hoping to change with us being. It was you and I at 9 p.m. that night that we suddenly discovered that we're actually going to have a closed road when we knew that if you just help people get through the causeway, it wasn't needing to be closed.
Thank you for that. Any further comments, questions? Councillor Taylor.
The question to the General Manager, is that something that come up in the traffic committee area that we have Transport New South Wales there at a traffic committee meeting and bring that sort of stuff up?
It could help. Just one more angle.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Yes.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the incorrect signage at, the police and having trouble, people driving through floodwaters. Who puts up the signage and where is that happening? I mean, it's obviously a very dangerous situation. Hopefully seem to lose people, which is very important.
There was so there was a slight difference of opinion of where we wanted the signage. The problem is that Allenjara Road, for example, wasn't closed till about 15 out. But we didn't want people to just at 100 kilometres per hour drive through our signage and destroy everything, including their cars and our signs. So we had them slightly on the side of the road. And that's where the difference was, is that the police wanted us to actually just kind of completely barrier off the road. And that caused difficulties for the people who could actually get to their properties from 0 to 14 kilometres out. And that's why because we're used to people, if they want to stop, they stop.
Yeah, part of the issue, Councillor Walker, is that, as the General Manager's alluding to, the roads will have a sign here at the start of the Allenjara Road, just over the levy bank, saying road closed. So what we need to do is have signs that says road closed at 14 k's out, so that people know, a similar thing happened on the Marthaguy Road. It wasn't until you got to Fernando Bridge that there was a problem, but it still says right at the intersection of the Oxley Highway and the Marthaguy road closed. So we need to overcome that in terms of local emergency management, that people actually have a really distinct idea of where the problem is, so that they can navigate their way and understand what's really happening. It's too much of a blanket, in my view, blanket approach instead of being very specific about what the problem is.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, in the future, a few additional things will help. We've purchased this display board over here, which will quite ultimately be able to be used for everyone to come along and have a look at the road closures that might come up, the detail that Allenjara Road 14 is out, it's closed, as well as our website, as well as our Facebook, and our distribution list that we send to the world. The second one, we've also purchased a mobile display board, solar-powered mobile display board. The same thing can be said. If we've got a real concern of a road, the people, it's closed 14 kilometres out, we can actually say, Ellendale Road closed 14 kilometres out on the other side, and people know that they can get to there. So we're slowly working on having improved improved ways to help.
Thank you for that. Any further comments on the meeting of the Local Emergency Management Committee and the outcomes of the recent voting event? Further put that, all those in favour, against, carried. Moving on to the meeting, the second meeting of the Property Master Committee. You, Councillor, move that.
To move it with a little bit of help from if possible, your help, and the second one.
So Councillor Walker seconded, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Walker.
What, with Raymond's help too, Mr. Mayor, on 5.1, after images, cotton plant image to be made more full of cotton with cotton bulbs. The header in the wet field have a more pronounced look as a wheat header.
No, it's not.
Well,
Attractive, but there's something behind it.
I think you've had too many modern headers in your place. That might be the problem. He's never had one of the old ones.
I have actually, whatever
Down on now, Rome, is there anything else we need to add?
On for the Nevertide one, I don't believe so.
Councillor Bruce has a comment.
Just a comment with the header, my suggestion was to turn it around, so it's facing outwards, so you can see.
See that it's a header.
Yeah, so you can
With
see.
the image reversed. With the image reversed.
Yes, but still maybe a different. Yeah.
And that means we'll be able to see Councillor Kennedy operating it.
So, just to be clear, just let's be very specific. Councillor Bruce, you're talking about a power takeoff header. But this one's got it's got a tractor and a.
It's a bucket.
And a thrasher.
Yeah. Right. So let's be very specific about what you want. Is what do we actually want there? Let's get it down verbatim.
You want a red one or a red one?
Or yellow one.
And you want a car takeoff header, or do you want an old style?
It was always old style, Mr. Mayor.
Always old style.
But it is hard to find, well, if the artist can
So
find.
as a old style header,
Yeah. Yeah. But it needs, as I said, it needs to be front end so you can see that you actually.
Thanks. Councillor Kennedy?
So, Mr. Mayor, we've probably got three options on the header. One could be a header that's dragged around by other horses,
Yeah.
a header that's dragged around by a tractor, or a header that's self-propelled.
an old style self-propelled is what we were doing.
Whatever the room wants, that's fine with me. But
That was described as an old self-propelled header.
Okay.
now, an old self-propelled header just look like a modern one.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I think the committee said that for an old style header,
Right, so if that's the case, it'd be a header with a horses pulling.
which is what we were looking for originally, but finding one that was a decent photo to be able to send up to the artist was difficult, and the few that I did find were all American or European. I couldn't find a photograph of a horse-drawn Australian header.
Makes Australia better than, so that's unusual.
Again, it was just I spent quite a while on the web trying to find things, and couldn't find anything that I could confirm was Australian made or an Australian header, a horse-drawn big version of a header.
Yeah. So the alternative after that is a header with a tractor pull. There is a thing.
In our lifetime, certainly counts against him, so.
So what should we do? The third option being a slightly modern,
Self-building. The onion photographs of that.
Okay. So if the committee, Councillor Walker, you're the chair of that committee, you happy with that?
There's been great discussion, and I don't know originally what was discussed at Nevertire. I think we've got two people here from Nevertire, and if they were at the meeting, that's fine. I really am not being involved with it.
Can I just through, Mayor, I think that we're just interested to see what the public,
It's just, I mean, what we're trying to do is make sure those images are as close as possible before, when they go out.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So
Then on 5.2, the old Federal Picture Theatre, do a third dash.
Councillor,
Yes.
Third dash being if the movie theatre images are not available due to copyright, they be changed to an image of a movie reel and projector. Yep. Comma, theatre usage. Theatre usage, which is Romeo and Juliet. No, I've done it. Debutante ball usage. What else?
That is it. Unless others,
Put an N in front of debutante ball.
others here have some other. Sorry.
The live theatre, that's what you put. So live theatre usage. I think that covers it, doesn't it? Now, the reason why is that we haven't got the time
exactly.
to have a third or fourth go at it.
So, understanding that. Councillor Walker, as a mover, and Councillor Jackson as a second, you happy with those additions to the recommendation? That we can get this out to public. There is the opportunity to have the public consultation, and then we can deal with it after that. But as the general manager is saying, that the time frame is pretty tight, so that we.
So I'm just wondering, so you're saying that will be up there, but what will go out to the public will be what we are
Well, we
saying?
just changed it to there. We're going to change the images as per what I've just described.
That they need to get back to the artist,
Yeah.
and hopefully he'll get back before Thursday.
Attempt to have a conversation with him this afternoon.
And as soon as you get it, then it'll go out to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Manager, Councillor Walker, Councillor Jackson for that. Any further comments so that we can get this out to public consultation? No further, sorry, Councillor Kinsey?
Apparently you can get an image of a header with a track with some horses pulling it, HB McKay, sunshine harvesting.
We haven't done that, Councillor Kinsey. We've just got a resolution that actually says it's going to be a model header. We're going to draft, if you want to do an amendment to it. Because what we were actually thinking of doing was, it was going to be an older version of a modern header. Very beginning, way back. To look like a header.
We happy, Councillor Walker, Councillor Jackson?
I'm happy with that, but as I say, never time, I mean, is that what was sort of talked about out there, man? It's not really.
I think we have the opportunity with community consultation, if there's an overriding view that it should be, as Councillor Kinsey suggesting, potentially a horse-drawn header, then that will come to the fore, and then we can know exactly what's required. Is that a reasonable proposition?
Yeah, fine, yeah.
But I think it would be worth certainly to never tire councillors to canvassing the local view on that, and just get a view. Anything further on the meeting, the recommendation there, the Public Arts Committee meeting, the one held on the 8th of February? No? And further, we'll put that, all those in favour, against, carries. Moving on to the meeting of the Plan Committee held Wednesday the 9th of February. We're happy to move that. Councillor Brewer, thank you. Second, Councillor Kinsey, Councillor Brewer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was 2 meetings on this day. This is the first 2 quite lengthy committee meetings, but the Plan Committee meeting was really mostly about bringing the new councils up to speed with some of the previous decisions that we've made, where we were with tenders and things like that. We've since had motor grader delivered in the last few days. So that's quite a positive. There are some other vehicles like the prime mover and side tipping trailers that will be some time off. The main resolution I think that was put on that day was for the introduction, where appropriate, for hybrid vehicles. And that's just in line with other councils, and we deemed that it would be appropriate going forward, based on requirements for carbon footprint control and those sorts of things. So there's currently a Toyota Orion that is a pool vehicle that will be the first of those, and the first appropriate vehicle to be swapped out as a hybrid. The rest of the vehicles will be looked at on a case-by-case basis, depending on their pattern of use and whether it's appropriate to have those type of vehicles for that use, i.e. utility vehicles and general management vehicles and those sorts of things. So we basically got to the point where we had no problem with hybrid vehicles, but they need to be appropriate for use. There was some, as you can see in the general business, there was some discussion bringing other councils up to speed on certain things. We asked for a copy of the plant register just to be tidied up, because it's quite a confusing set of documents and it's not complete. So there's going to be work going into that to make sure that we have an accurate register. As you would remember, in recent years, the numbering system has changed in there, and some of that numbering system is not necessarily confusing, but it's new, and as new machinery comes in, it gets a new number, and some of those things are difficult to stay on top of. So we're going to get a reference point for that with those plant register listings. And I think that's about it, unless anyone has any questions on that.
Councillor Walker.
Mr. Mayor, I was asking, I noticed about the workforce when you get the new side tipper, which gathers some months away, but are they trained to use that?
There's currently, it was a concern of ours as well, to make sure that the general manager had identified an appropriate driver or drivers, and we were assured that that is the case. So we were, happy with that result, with that response, I should say.
Does that mean those, they're the only ones that drive it, or is it in time with the others that are trained up so that?
Currently, and the general manager can correct me, but currently there will be a single driver for that side tipper and prime mover.
Driving one of the trucks that we're going to get rid of, needs MC license, used to drive the road, one of the road trucks.
I'm just wondering if you had an alternative in case it goes away, or you can see, you have a backup, that's all.
I'm not certain, but some of the older drivers would have MCs as well.
Thank you, Councillor Roy. I'm also gratified to see that there's some consideration taken regarding slashes and mowing and efficient use of the appropriate size machinery. I think that's something that we have not dealt with as well as we could have, and thank you for looking at that.
Yeah, there was some discussion about, highly powered tractors on small slashes, and so we're getting a report on that going forward. We have some slashes in the replacement program, but as you could understand, there's an awful lot of roadside slashing required, so we've got to keep going with the machine we've got until some of that new machine comes through, and then we'll reconsider the size and type for the job.
Thank you. Any, Councillor Kinsey?
Also, Mr Mayor, we discussed the trouble we have with recruiting mechanics, etc. And I asked the question what are we doing about apprentices, and wasn't really a definitive answer. Be interested to see what council policy is to that.
Okay. Responsible, that's something
We've got one apprentice on, and the ad's going out as a third or fourth year apprentice or a heavy plant mechanic for the vacant position we've got.
At the moment, the ad has actually, that position has been re-advertised already, so it's out there already again. For the heavy diesel plant mechanic, or a fourth year apprentice for that role.
Thank you, Councillor Kinsey. Councillor Bruce?
Just a question. So when you take on apprentices, do they have a contract where once they finish their apprenticeship they do stay on with council, or are they free to just head off to another job?
Either way, it depends on the quality of the apprentice at the end of his term.
So they're not set, it's not in concrete that if you do your apprenticeship you've got to stay on for so long.
For the last few years, haven't been our employees. They've been an apprenticeship organisation's employees.
And then, of course, Councillor Bruce fits into what our workforce plan is. You have a position for that person to move on into, is the other part of the equation. So that whole workforce plan is under constant review.
And the previous one has finished his, I'll call it motor vehicle apprenticeship, and we kept him going to continue on with a further apprenticeship to get his heavy diesel mechanic certification.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions regarding the meeting of the Plan Committee for Wednesday the 9th of February? Being nothing further, we'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Moving on to the meeting of the Roads Committee, held Wednesday that same day, the 9th of February. Someone happy to move that? Councillor McCloskey, second, Councillor Kinsey. Councillor McCloskey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It was the, must say, the informative and productive meeting, given that prior to the meeting, the elected members took it upon themselves to go on a bit of a road tour, to see where things were at and what was happening out there, given that we did, I'd say probably 80% of the roads south of the highway never highways. We went up the River Road through the Ellendra Road construction, flood damage, up 347, construction there. around through Merrill, Dragon Cow, back down Pine Club Soldiers and home. And then the day after that, Councillor White and myself did another little bit of a trip down through Gravy Lane, ran to the Bullet Room, just have a look and see what was happening. So it was enlightening. You can see where we've been, what we're doing. But given the meeting itself, we're presented with a number of reports, which are highlighted there in the paper. Asset reports to read roads and stormwater are a little bit daunting, but be that they are, they're a thing of what we've got to accept. A few things we found with respect to the tour is, say, for instance, we've asked for a report to be done with respect of the standard to which certain roads are built, given that, for example, the Canberra Road, which is currently had a piece of work done on, the pavement width and the seal width for the classification of the road was the belief from those that saw it was somewhat excessive, given that, say, for instance, a traffic count, which is a seasonal traffic count, was something like 50 cars or 50 vehicles per day. So we've asked for a report to be presented back to the committee with respect to what future standards will be. Also, that the road hierarchy, given that there are different classifications of roads within the Shire, that they're identified and colour coded on a map so you can relate to them in terms of what they are, where they are. We also asked that what was the inspection regime with respect to the roads? How often are they inspected? By who? And were they inspected in relation to where they sit within the hierarchy, so that you knew that, given, say, the Wombier Road, which is potentially your most heavily trafficked local road, is inspected on a weekly, fortnightly basis. The regional road, say the Corinda Road, again, and something like Cabreton Lane, for one of an example, might be once a month because it's a unsealed local road. So there'll be reports coming back to the committee with respect to where we're looking to see things go.
Thank you, Councillor Bossy. Look, I congratulate you and the other councillors for taking it upon yourself to go and do a preliminary tour before the first meeting. Thank you for that, and thank you for really considering what and how we'll get the maximum bang for our dollars spent on that. They're our biggest asset and they're our biggest cost, and we just have to be mindful of achieving the greatest
And with respect to that, Mr. Mayor, the thought was, given, say, and using the Canberra Road or the old Warren Road as an example, given the extent to which the road is constructed, be it pavement width and seal width, if you can reduce that this way, you can potentially increase the road length that way.
Thank you for that. Councillor Drews.
Yes, through you, Mayor. I'm just really glad to see this investigation be undertaken with this small tree growth. But I also would like to see it on the sealed roads too, because there's a lot of areas on bends where you're getting a lot of regrowth, and right now it would be the time to get rid of it before it gets too big.
Yeah.
So I think sealed roads probably as well as the unsealed, but I think it's great that you.
That is in terms of some of this site distance, but also in some of the areas where we noted that this small growth had occurred. It's actually is an indication of how long it's been since council's been there, because the small sapling that's normally 2 foot high, say for instance, has been there in the path of where the grade would normally go, would indicate that the road hasn't been graded for a period of time as well.
I think that certainly forms part of the ongoing inspection regime to have those things noted, Councillor Drews. So, yeah, thank you for that. And the roads committee might well keep on top of that particular item in terms of inspections and noting where that goes to. Any further comments on the roads? Can you get Councillor Derrick?
Yes, thank you, through Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to know if there was any update on the condition of the Stony Creek crossing that was raised in the general road matters. I understand there has been some complaint action requests lodged.
Inspection's been done, and I believe there's actually no work warranted compared to elsewhere.
Anything further on the minutes of the road committee meeting and the recommendation coming out of that? Being nothing further, we'll put that, all those in favour, against, carried. Moving to UMR Waste Depot, meeting held on the 14th of February. Councillor Bruce, you happy to move that? Seconded, Councillor Walker, Councillor Bruce.
I'll go through the tipper pile. Has got rather big out there, but it is on the to-do list, but the floods sort of put all that back, so I don't presume I haven't been out there this week, it hasn't happened yet, just read if you did. The transfer station, we actually went for a site inspection after the meeting. The stormwater drainage is nearly done, it's just a bit on the other side of the road into the pond that's going to be completed, I believe. The concrete works for the transfer station are currently on vendor panel, and that closes on the 3rd of March. The small truck that's been converted as a transport truck is still ongoing, hasn't happened yet. So yeah, it was really good to go out and have a look at the site again, just to get our heads wrapped around and see where the roads are happening. With the impact of the flood, EPA, as you'll see, we have been given permission, you can take your gardens and go into another town if the depot is not accessible, and then looking into whether they possibly may be able to just open never-tight tip in an emergency. Possibly it's something that's still being looked at.
By EPA, Councillor Bruce, or by him?
Both ways, I suppose, but is that right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we would have to get confirmation and advice from the EPA.
Also, the General Manager, item 6.3, he would really like to see the Clean Up Australia Day happen again here. Obviously, not this year, because it's a bit close and it's not budgeted for, so that's something that we'll be looking at in the next financial year. Any comments on that one, General Manager?
I would hope that everyone can be involved in even this year's Clean Up Australia and go and register and go and get some bags and go and clean up your patch. If I can, in fact, is it this week? Is it next week?
I think we need to know the date first, and then we've got a chance of perhaps advertising it on our website. It would be a reasonable thing to do.
April or March?
March.
End of March. So something, that's part of the resolution.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask the General Manager of Health and Development, do you have bags? You used, some years, one year you did when I came in, is no bags?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I haven't sourced bags as yet.
Okay. You might be able to.
If I can source them, I will provide them, yes.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the council resolves this, Manager Health and Development will be organising her bags and things as soon as possible to Sunday the 6th of March. Which really will be a Facebook, mad Facebook and website things as soon as possible. Get people interested. And we need to make sure we do something on Sunday the 6th.
Yes, I'll just finish up with general business that the rural access charge came up again in our meeting. We tried to do it 3 years ago, it was in the drought, I know that. But we're going to look at this again, but a lot more discussion is going to go into this, but not for 23, 24 maybe. So we're going to revisit that, because there are a lot of people like off the rural properties that do bring their rubbish into the depot, and free of charge, so we're going to have another look at this in the future. Anyway, I think that's about it. If anyone's got
Thank you,
comments.
Councillor Bruce. Councillor Brewer, question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. For Councillor Drews, the timber pile on the roster is on the roster to be done. What do they do?
Shredded.
Just all gets to be mashed up into pieces.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yeah, the machine chips it.
Okay, and what happens to the chips that get taken away or?
So they remain on site, they can't be sold because they're being contaminated, and they're used for revegetation works on site.
Right.
And through you, they usually do the green waste at a similar time as well. And actually, I forgot to mention while we're out having our inspection, the metal, scrap metal fellow turned up too.
Councillor Kinsey?
How often, through you, Mr Mayor, how often does the wood get chipped up, the rubbish get smashed up again?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, it's not on a scheduled routine basis, it's on a as-needs basis.
Councillor Jackson?
Through you, Mr Mayor, just a question regarding garbage collection tender. Is that, and this could be my ignorance, so excuse me, we currently have a contractor collecting garbage. This is about reviewing that contract, putting it out to tender and potentially a change in contractor, depending on how the tender process goes.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that is correct. So the contract expires on the 30th of June, and that's a renewal. So yeah, so that contract will be reviewed and will be changed to only include a pick-up delivery service.
Yeah, traditionally the contract has been for a 5-year period, Councillor Jackson, and so the original contract has been that it was to do with pick-up as well as keeping the tip tidy. Now we have the UMR waste facility manned, it's become a different situation, so yes, that'll be addressed when the new contract, the contract goes out for tender. Any further councillors on the minutes of the UMR Waste Depot Committee and the recommendation coming out of that? If nothing further, we'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Moving on to the meeting of the Mannix Committee held on the 15th of February. Someone happy to move those minutes, please? Councillor Jackson. Second. Councillor Jackson.
I didn't have anything specifically I wanted to ask. I put quite detail.
Major, is there anything you wish to draw to council or's attention that came out of that managed committee meeting?
So I think it's on page 3 of the minutes, just under $462,000 of emergency restoration claim work has been approved. They're yet to get reimbursed, but we would hope within the next month or so. And of course, $35,370 we have to fund. That's the kind of portion. And would you believe it goes up to 36,000 something for the next one, November, December. They don't govern those industry. The new claim, the bit this, the longer one, hopefully the next week or so will go into our and be organised by our consultant. Put it to Transport for New South Wales for consideration. We're trying to do a reasonably large newsletter for February, and we've got a few, and I've had a little bit of interest of people contacting me in regard to the divisional manager engineering services position.
Thank you. Any further, sorry, councillor Walker, you?
Yeah, I suppose that I'd probably ask, Regional and Finance and Administration, the general business without notice, page 6. The clarification of special COVID-19 leave, I just have any update on that, I'll that's all.
Mr. Mayor, it was based on when the RAC tests come out as to people that may have symptoms and may not have symptoms, so they could take annual leave, or they take sick leave, or are they eligible for special leave. It's a grey area, it changes all the time. Our policy basically says that special leave would only be granted if they've run out of other types of leave. But we had scenarios where if council instructed someone to go home because they thought they had COVID, then it shouldn't be out of their leave entitlement. So it was just a clarification obviously.
Councillor Walker. Any comments, questions regarding the Annex Committee meeting? Thank you. That being the case, we'll put that, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Yeah. Councillor, we might suspend suspending orders at the minute and welcome Kate and Shona from the RiverSmart organisation make a presentation regarding that organisation and Visitor Information Centre. Kate and Shona spoke to the Economic Development Committee last week, and in front of you will have a précis of more detail of what's being proposed by RiverSmart as alternatives and possibilities as we move forward with the information centre and they move forward with their windows on the wetland centre. So thanks.
You moved that, and I think it was Councillor Jackson who was
seconded
for the suspending standing orders.
Apologies. So welcome, Kate and Jonah, and please take the floor, and you have some slides, so that's excellent. Thank you.
So before I get into the slides, thank you very much, Mayor Quigley and councillors for inviting us to as Milton just mentioned, Mayor Quigley just mentioned, we have already presented to the Economic Development and Promotions Committee, and we gave a lot of information there to further inform you for your deliberations. And we've also received our proposal, I understand. So I want to just, before I go into the presentation, just give some key points that came out that we want you to take home. One is that RiverSmart is a not-for-profit organisation. We have recently gone through a restructure with all our current board members now residing in the local region. We've also renewed all our governance protocols. RiverSmart has developed the WOW precinct using grant funds, massive fundraising efforts and huge volunteer input. It is now a locally much valued precinct and is increasingly attracting visitors. You would be all aware of the Destination Macquarie Marshes project, which was jointly submitted by RiverSmart and councils. This project not only built the fantastic Barrama Boardwalk, but also put in place directional and information shelters at all the surrounding shires and key locations. It provided for disabled access to the Tiger Bay Walkway and included changes to the old school building at the WOW, resulting in that building becoming the Destination Macquarie Marshes Information Centre. That was part of the project. This project has already increased tourism within our shire despite the COVID restrictions and limited promotion. In 2020, Council closed its Visitor Information Centre, meaning that the WOW Centre is now the only point of contact for visitors in our region. RiverSmart currently operated that Visitor Information Centre, bearing all the operational costs. We now believe that there is a huge opportunity to take this tourism with our input to a much higher level and really build upon the great asset that we have in our region. Thanks, Joe. So my presentation today is just to reposition where we're at. So RiverSmart wants to return to our core priorities. So that is rivers for people, wildlife and sustainability. That means we want to renew our focus on our educational and tourism delivery using all the facilities that have developed, the Wowth Gardens, the Tiger Bay wetlands, the Macquarie River and the marshes. The information displays within the gardens and within the VIC and events within the church building and the stage. All of these feed into tourism. We want to renew our impetus on grant acquisition, including philanthropic organisations, and will support the Shire relating to any of those applications relate to tourism industry. Next slide, thanks. So, yeah, we're revising our value exchange between us and the council. So we're proposing that the council open the visitor information for 7 days per week, and it's your responsibility to operate and govern that centre. The reason we're proposing 7 days a week is that is what was required for a visitor information centre to gain accreditation. On gaining accreditation, you get assistance from New South Wales Tourism on marketing and all their promotional activities. We suggest that council employ staff to manage that visitor information centre. We will assist that staffer with information and collaborate in any way, shape or form that you require. We also suggest that we could provide the destination management plan, which is indicated here is usually upwards of 50 grand worth. We already did that once before for the destination Macquarie Marshes plan, but it needs to be updated, and we would ourselves require it for our business. At the moment, RiverSmart is doing all the cleaning of the toilets, all the buildings, etc., and we suggest that should be your responsibility. However, we would take on all the costs associated with the church building. We would hope that upon grant procurement, which we've already put in, as you'll be aware, with council, that eventually the entrance, the exit, the car parking and the drainage on that site and the entrance part where the rain garden is proposed, we would gain a grant to fix those issues because it's definitely an issue. We're suggesting we co-manage the WOW precinct to develop enhanced tourism experience, the cultural outcomes and our educational services. We would want to complete and maintain some of those landscaping. The native gardens are important to our educational aspects, and we really would like to see that part of the project to fruition. As you can see, we were quite happy to provide our advice and measured advice on the marshes and river-related tourism, continue your advocacy and lobbying state government sectors. So we're offering our IP to assist in more tourism development as well. So I want to point out that right now Warren tourism output is only 0.8% versus the surrounding shires. So that go up to Canberra is 1.5%, Burke and Bogan at 2.2%, Walgett and Cobar is 4.5%. All of those shires employ at least one person in the visitor information centre, sometimes more. So we can go to the next slide, please. So you can see at the core of it, RiverSmart really believe that a collaborative partnership with RiverSmart and the Shire will lead ultimately to the best outcomes to increase the visitor experience and we can really assist to drive tourism in the region. The level of input is really up to you guys, how much you want from us and how much you want to do. We would appreciate, we've given a lot of information to council, we would appreciate to know what your hesitations are so that we can contribute to a valued exchange. So then I'd appreciate any comments and considerations that you'd like to be explored. And I'd also like to invite all councillors. There's been quite a lot of changes over especially in the Visitor Information Centre. And I don't think many of you are actually aware of the restructure within that building. A lot of volunteer work went into pulling down walls, putting them up again and replanning. So it's now actually 3 rooms. When we presented to the Economic Development Committee, we showed the plans for the display, which was a lot of Marsha's display. You have provided the existing information that used to have in the Warren Visitor Information Centre, and that's all in the entrance way, and stuff that you get from Dubbo, pamphlets and other regions we've got there as well. There is huge potential in that building to increase the promotion of Warren businesses, Warren attractions, etc. There is just lots of room in there and lots of, yeah, as I said, potential. The other thing I'd like to point out is your data from the Visitor Information Centre previously indicated that more than 60 to 75% of visitors inquired about the marshes. That is a jewel that Warren has, that no other council. We were actually fortunate, the previous River Smart boards ended up in Warren. They actually originally were talking to Narromine, they talked to Campbell. Warren Show Council, luckily for us, assisted with offering that school building. Development of the precinct now is a result of River Smart gaining all that funding and developing that. And I personally think that's a huge asset to Terra. And Warren itself has a big potential to really drive tourism and increase the economic circulation in this district that would provide. So any further questions?
Thank you, Kate, for that presentation. I think we're certainly very happy to take questions from the floor to to Kate and to Shona if required. So please feel free in this forum to ask the questions directly to Kate or Shona.
I've got a question, Kate, if you don't mind. I've got a copy of your email that went to the Mayor and the General Manager on the 7th of Feb. If I look into the lens of your cost estimates in the back here, and thank you for listing some of those. A couple of comments on that. I think that the cost you've associated with the employment and tourism customer service officer is probably significantly undercooked. I think that's.
Can I just answer that part?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so we put the lowest level entryway when we looked it up. Now you may cost that differently. 2 things about those costings. We presented the costings as it costs us totally now. That was on the one side, and then we had what we thought maybe your costs for your consideration. Now, obviously, your employment strategies, etc., are totally up to you. But we went in for the lowest level entry point, if you like, and that's what that costing is.
Yeah, yeah, you've acknowledged the fact that there's no superannuation or other on costs in that. So that number probably looks closer to $100,000 than 66, I think. That's more of a comment than anything. The other is, you allude to in your email that that COVID has introduced uncertainty in the planning timeframe for River Smart income generating activities. For me to feel really comfortable about any partnership agreement, I really need to know timeline, proposed events that are going to, and it can be a brainstorming sort of thing. Like the next economic development committee, I missed the last one, unfortunately, but I would have said it back the same thing, that we have to as far as I can see, costs are negatives and potential earning opportunities are positives for the arrangement. With only one side of the ledger, it's all costs, and to understand whether we're going to go forward with it, we have to have a better feel for what sort of income generating activities you would have planned or what are possible for that site.
So I'd like to answer that in two ways, Councillor Brittle. One is our activities are our costs and feed, the way they feed into council is that they bring in people which then contributes to your whole tourism strategy. We're not suggesting that you cover our costs for those activities. COVID has definitely affected our activities. We had tours planned, buses coming, educational tours coming, all cancelled because of COVID. They're only just starting to get there again. We've been advised by Owen Closey, who just I know is working with council, that there is a massive risk to us to promote at the moment, and I'm going to be challenged by this, promote tours to Barrama and the Marshes area because we can't get the access because it might rain, because that's a risk to Riversmart. That is challenging for us. I mean, that's the nature of where we live, in my opinion. But so that's one of the things that we need to overcome. We did give a list of activities that we've got planned for the rest of the year to the Economic Development Committee. One of the things that we need to do, though, is actually extricate our staff from doing the face-to-face in that visitor information centre, so we can actually get on with all that development on our business side that will feed into your tourism outfit. At the moment, we're spending more of our time in good faith opening that centre. So that's where we're at. Yeah, it's definitely, but as I said, it is, our costs are our costs. You either believe that we bring more people in or we don't. But certainly our aim is, if you want to increase people's understanding of the river, the nature and the environment, it goes to say that you need to bring them here to see it, to experience it. That is why we spend so much time on developing what we've done. We want to move it away from that development and actually start doing more of the activity. And we've done a lot of preliminary work with the land anglers, the education people especially. There's a huge potential in educational, what I call tourism, educational. They're bringing schools out, camping them on a property, doing, or wherever, doing tours to the marshes, doing it. We've developed all these educational models that feed into, align with all the school curriculum, so we can deliver XYZ model for the land angling or the winelands. They provide that cost to us that brings people here. Land angling is booked to the hilts at the moment, now that COVID's finished. We've been working with them continuously. Kinross, the same thing. There are lots of private schools, same thing. They're prepared to spend more dollars, but we need time to actually work on that.
And do they generate income for your organisation?
Well, we would be, if we provided that module, that's a cost that we would charge to them.
Right.
We've got all that developed up already. Yes, and if we were providing food, obviously there'd be a margin on top of that, use of the site, margin on top of that.
What does it look like without that council employee in your mind? Does it fall apart?
Well, you won't have someone running your visitor information centre. We cannot afford to do it.
Okay.
So you've got, right, that's the nitty-gritty. We cannot afford to continue to offer a free service.
And one final question, it's a question and an observation. There's been no discussion yet or in this document about the cafe and the ability or otherwise to generate income from that? Can you just give us a
Okay,
heads up of what might happen?
I'll go from the
So I
historical.
see three separate entities here, we've
Yes.
only discussed two.
Yeah, okay. I'll go with this historical premise from Riversmart. Previous boards made the assumption that if they had the cafe there, that would support the business. That is an incorrect assumption. The current board, and this will continue to be so, will not run a cafe. We have, as you know, put out to advertise the cafe for lease. Our advice is to review and reconsider, and we are in that process of how we best go about food and alcohol services when required, because obviously they are required. When you bring in a whole liquor tour of people, you need to actually feed them, and they want to be in that precinct and do that. In fact, there is actually quite a lot of demand locally from the same thing. Now, whatever we do in there will be either utilising existing businesses for catering purposes, or it will definitely not provide the same sort of delivery that's already existing. But Riversmart, again, I'll go back to our main goal. It is not to run a cafe.
So then,
It is to deliver the river's environment.
so the purpose of your annual liquor licence is to have one-off events or something like that,
That's
not,
sort of, yeah. So when you have an event which would require, so if you're doing a high-end event, if you're, and this is definitely on the long-term prospect, there are tourism deliverers that are keen to do flyovers to marshes, helicopter or plane. The idea is they might fly from Dubbo or Burke, they would land in Warren, they could have an introduction, tour of Tiger Bay, etc., etc. They would have a schmick meal with alcohol, do the flyover of the marshes, return. That's big biggies. You cannot deliver a bit of a tea and cake and that's it. They need a higher end product. And yes, absolutely. The other thing that goes on in the church, which is a service to the community, is our exhibitions. We continue to work with Outback Arts for displaying local artists and cultural events. Often they're accompanied by cheese and wine to increase the visitation. There are artists, musical artists, for instance, that we would like to promote on the stage. Again, having the opportunity to have alcohol served there is a plus, and that would actually give income to Riversmart, which would feed into our requirement to continue as a not-for-profit. Every dollar that we earn has to legally go back into the business. It is not a commercial business.
so does your committee have a business plan for moving forward?
It's in development because we actually need to know where we stand as council.
Well, I push back and say we need to have somewhat of a business plan to be able to make a call on it as well. I think it's a two-way street.
Well, absolutely, it is a two-way street, but again, I've given you as much information as I possibly can. In fact, I actually said this to your general manager, and Owen, I'm sure, has said the same thing. It's our business, what our business plan is.
That'll make it difficult to make.
I know. I mean, if you understand that what we provide, if this is in good faith, right? If you understand, if you believe that what we've provided up to this point is of huge value to the Shire, and I do believe that, and I actually believe the community believes that, you either believe that we really have the interests of heart to deliver on our core vision, which means we want to do all those XYZ services. Yes, we've had some past difficulties, certainly. I'm not denying that, and you're all aware of that. We have gone through a major restructure. We've kept going for the last 2 years and not much, and this is not an ordinary rate, to be honest. We have some big plans, yeah. Our advice is that we can deliver those plans, and we intend to. Now, I certainly, and we are definitely working on and have got parts of the business plan in place, but we need to know our own things. We could walk out there and have no overheads and still do some of that plan, but we would actually lose out on all the stuff that we've actually invested in there, needing all that information boards, all those displays, the garden, the location, the access to Tiger Bay, all of that. We lose, and frankly, I think council loses.
Okay, so could you summarise what you're saying by saying that what you want is council to run the Visitor Information Centre and have that appropriately staffed as council sees fit? Because you, as Riversmart, a completely separate business to council, see value in having a Visitor Information Centre, and that you don't want to run it because you've got your core business to run. You would like to see council would support that motion, and also any works that are currently potentially underway, or we've got grant applications in for, that you mentioned the drainage, you mentioned the driveway access. Is that really in a nutshell? You're not expecting us to contribute to your business as such at all? No, it's just a tourism asset of the Shire, but we're not involved in running it, or nor do we have to.
No, I mean, we would have liked to have had support for what we're contributing into what you think is your tourism thing, certainly. Whether you can or you cannot do that, that is again up to you. It's not part of our business, but I do want to re-emphasise that we actually deliver a lot of services for Shire.
I see that you're asking for collaboration from the Shire. This has so much potential. We've got some very committed and dedicated, passionate people who've got a lot of knowledge, they've got a lot of plans, and I really think it needs more discussion in council. And I agree with Kate, they're both doing this for nothing, and they're providing a service that is benefiting the Shire and the people. And we've got all these great facilities. We only talked about it yesterday, trying to get a person that could be at the Visitor Information Centre, but also maybe doing grants or publicising things. They have a package, a beautiful race course, and what's going on out there, pool, splash park. We've got so much to offer and great ovals, and you tie it into what they're trying to do. Could be an answer. And I think this needs to go to the stages of discussion with council. The council, I suppose, needs to basically decide if either they're on board or they want to help, which is
Yeah, I think it goes to this. I think Councillor Jackson's nutshell is really well, in that it goes to Riversmart will be pursuing their own agenda and looking after the church building. It's how council interacts in terms of the visitor information space and where council sees itself fitting there. I think we can, how Riversmart operate their own business, in my view, is entirely Riversmart's prerogative. And so we need to have a much more detailed conversation, I believe, Kate, is just, let's narrow it down a little bit to about just that visitor information centre. It may be a transformation period. You know, there's nothing in our budget, and I think Councillor Brewer is, talking about the costs to council to actually pursue this matter. It's not in our workforce plan at the minute either. So we need to step back a little bit, but I consider there will be a transformational stage where we work, in my view, that we work towards a promotions tourism person, but it's not. I think we see a number of, in my view, again, minor agreements, and as things change, we move along. But we get some sort of basis to work from, and then move forward.
Okay. Can I also just quickly say, I mean, I keep hearing questions about finance and Andrew's been saying, you know, business plans, you're right, River Smart is run by a committee and they're not for profit and they want to make it successful. I think council needs to realise, if I hear, they're doing this for nothing. No one's getting paid to sit there and provide information and give out pamphlets and book things and like that. And I just think that needs to be realised so that moving forward.
That's true, Katrina, but also.
Or it's closed, or it gets closed.
Exactly, but that was the same case when the Visitor Information Centre was operating in town. So it was being done for nothing, so.
It was, but the service was pretty ordinary, to be frank.
Yeah, okay, take it on board, but the goalposts haven't changed, what council was doing hasn't changed. So we need to, if we want to move forward, we have to just progress slowly. We know that what the basis is. I think we need to meet again with narrowed down sort of parameters and then we can move forward.
I'd like to briefly just just contribute to what Mayor Quigley is saying. So I understand you need that transitional period. In that transitional period, at the very least, we would require the overheads of that centre to be covered. That is the absolute minimum. We would have to actually decide whether we can afford to open it for you. We've done that in good faith up to this point in time because the Destination Macquarie Marshes project said that that would become the Macquarie Marshes Information Centre, which we assumed would mean it was open. Now, as long as it's closed, the reviews that come as a consequence of that are damaging. We need to get ourselves out of there so that we can develop what we're talking about, which feeds into what I understand Council wants to do and really increase tourism. I totally understand that it is not in your existing budget because, frankly, Warranshire has never had a very good tourism budget. They have not recognised, like some other shires, the potential for tourism. I'm challenging you guys that there is massive potential here. I do understand that there are cost constraints, absolutely. But everything starts somewhere, and we've started and provided you with a big asset. You need to take it forward. And I agree that there'll be a transitional period, but we cannot afford to cover all those costs over.
I think we had that discussion with the Mayor of Finance Administration, and yeah, there's certainly in the budget there was an amount of down 6 or 8 grand towards overhead. So what?
That was for maintenance. That was towards the maintenance of the school building. It does not cover the cost of power, phone bill, etc. within the centre.
We'll get some detail on that, Kate, and sort that out. I think we can do that. See what goes away.
It was, Mr. Mayor, it was actually for maintenance and operation of all the buildings of the facility, not just. It's in the MOU. It's maintenance and operations of all the buildings of the facility. That's what's in that memorandum of understanding agreement.
Which is lapsed because.
Yeah, I mean that was the proposal was put forward to council to bring the rest of the councillors that may not have seen the rest of the document that we put in there. Council originally had a memorandum of agreement with River Smart, which lapsed, which was at the end of its time. Council said we will revisit it once River Smart had gone through its restructure, which is why we're now at this point. We're asking for, and I put that on the slide, a revisit of that memorandum of agreement.
Is that possible? And maybe just the bare minimum of cost to cover what's happening?
Well, I think we have that discussion, see what's in our budget there, and as the General Manager and Finance Administration are pointing out, we'll certainly, we'll work towards that.
We will check out what the MOU says, and I've already offered that the $1,200 that you owe is paid for by the $6,000 that we've got, because I believe that the MOU says that it's operation and maintenance of all the buildings in the facility. So we'll check it out a bit further.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've had different views from different general managers, I have to say. And our understanding was it was maintenance, it was not for the power and the, for the Visitor Information Centre. And so, and we did not want the precedent that the maintenance budget got chewed up by the power bill, if you get it. Yeah. Which is why it's, so, I'd like to say.
Mr. Mayor, it is correct, it's for the maintenance of the building.
Yeah, so what I wanted to point out is we didn't want to say, okay, thank you very much for your offer and you take it out of the maintenance this time, but what happens then? We still don't know where we stand. We've still got to pay. I mean, if you were opening your existing old visitor information centre, you'd have to pay the power bill and the phone bill. You'd have to clean it while you didn't have a toilet. So you see, there are still costs.
I'm sure it can be worked out, Kate.
Yeah, we really had a budget for that. That's, yeah.
I mean, now that you're up and running again, I think we've got someone to work with. You know, we were getting all sorts of conflicting meetings.
I appreciate that.
And now, at least, I thank you for taking on the chairmanship of the whole thing. We know who we're talking to. We've got somewhere to go, Kate. So I think, you know, thank you for the presentation. Thanks, Shane, for being here again. But I think there is somewhere we can move to.
And please come and visit. We really would, I mean, we would really actually welcome having a whole council visitation over there and explaining what has been done. And if not, if that doesn't happen, then individually we'd really appreciate that, because I think it would give it a better understanding to everybody.
Mr. Mayor, hopefully we'll have a very good function fertility AROC goes into
And it's a clash with everything else. Yes.
Oh, okay. Right. Thanks, Kate, and thanks, Shana. And I'd like you to stay and have more input with this, because we'll adjourn now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Councillor Jackson, you moved it, you seconded to come out of standing order.
We move back into standing order.
Then we will
Back in.
rest.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. We'll resume our meeting. And we move on, continue on with the reports of the committees. The next one of those being the meeting of the Showground Racecourse Committee, held on the 15th of February. Someone have to move that. Councillor Drews, seconder. Councillor Jackson, Councillor Drews.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. A pretty comprehensive meeting, this one. The general manager went through the actual checklist, even with the deleted items, just to get the councillors a bit updated with where things have been happening and continuing. Then we had a very comprehensive report on the progress of what's been completed and what's still happening out there. There's a lot that's been completed, the pilot crossing draft areas with the canteens, toilets, new sewage system out there, which is great. The pony club cross country is still in progress. I think parts of it, they've done a fair bit of it. The equestrian centre looks fantastic. What's there so far? Full of LED hanging lights there, and with the council, with consultation with Old Riding, they've selected some sand from Narromine to be put down on there. It's not there yet. The Faulkner Lounge There's been a fair bit happening in there. Disabled toilet, the other toilets have been painted and upgraded. The ceiling's in, the flooring, tiles and carpet are there to be put down. And there's a suggestion any old carpet that is taken off from up there, they will recycle it down in the jockey rooms. Because they're asking for a bit down there, so that's great. They've done a lot, all the flooring area in the downstairs bar, and the poultry pavilion's been renewed. A lot of electrical updates happening. The caravan camping area, they're doing a lot of work with the toilets over there. They've been painted. There's a lot of sewage infrastructure happening. Where else? And there's going to be a lot happening with the toilets and things around the main area within there. The biggest, a big issue though is unfortunately we didn't have the delegates from the PNA at the meeting because we really don't know what's going on with the cattle yards. We hear that they're having trouble getting someone to come up and have a look at it and try and do a design. So I'll see if the General Manager has any more updates with that in a minute. And I actually brought up that I think the children's playground area that he's looking at, a lot of the wood there is deteriorating. It's pretty old, and they investigate that. And it was also discussed that we'd like to see a spreadsheet of the finances with the actual showground outputs, income and expenditure, to see whether there's anywhere that we might be able to do a bit of cost saving. So yes, it was a very good report. It's great to see all the things that have been finished and what's still to go. So air conditioning is still going to go in the Faulkner Lounge. Windows at some stage, and then things are getting carried out with the function, things will be happening out there like the show, where they'll be up to without the progress. So that's about the crux of it, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Bruce. Councillor Jackson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just a question regarding the finalisation of some of these projects. I would imagine that there's a sort of time pressure there for things like toilet facilities and whatnot. Given a show is being booked and it's going to go ahead. In regards to the adult riding arena, do they have events booked waiting for giving them some pressure on if they complete it, or are they not booking anything until they know it's not tick?
No, as far as I'm aware, they haven't, because it has been finished. So,
Thank you.
just another quick thing too, with that area, it looks like it possibly may be multi-purpose use, that they may be able to have like cattle in there with some events, so it's just not horse use, it's with the sand that they're putting in it too. That I'm correct on that, I think. It's not, could be multi-purpose use.
Yes, through the main operators of it, the people having to probably clean up behind themselves, yes.
Yes. Is any questions or?
Thank you, Councillor Bruce. That was quite comprehensive, and we do know a lot of those projects, and many mentioned in the General Manager's report, bring us up to speed with where things are. And awareness of who's undertaking a lot of this work. Is that council staff or is it contractors? We are
Mostly contractors.
Mostly contractors.
Infrastructure projects, officers, managing officers. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Any further comments, questions regarding the Showground Racecourse meeting? Nothing further, we'll put that, all those in favour, it's carried. Moving on to meeting of the sporting facilities, meeting held on the next day, Wednesday, 16th February. Councillor Taylor, you happy to move that? Second. Councillor Jackson, Councillor Taylor.
Mr Mayor, just on the recommendation, read solar, investigating solar for that whole precinct, but we'll put that up as the fuel power annually is around about 37,000 $7,000, so I think we can make some significant savings if we investigate solar, but not just the fuel area down there. Other matters that came up after the committee addressed all the main user groups' concerns in the initial plan, Carter. There'll now be an update master plan for that, and that should be ready reasonably soon. Also, the infrastructure projects manager have the amenities plan finalised, I think, pretty soon. I won't give it time. And again, both those then will be put out again to the main user groups for consultation and comment, and I think they can go to public awareness, I guess, community consultation. Again.
We'll then try and get on to getting to tender, particularly with that kiosk block, amenities block, get it to tender as fast as we can. Yeah. So in terms of, as Councillor Taylor said, we're waiting for the mapping guys to do the master plan again, with revisions post huge input, and all those revisions have been taken into account. The planning guys who are external haven't had the opportunity to get that finalised yet. That'll happen in the next couple of weeks. I recall with Councillor Taylor, I think.
The next draft is on the desk, but it's just missing a few things. Mr Mayor, what's actually going to happen is that the draft plan for the kiosk and amenities is going to be talked to, discussed with the three main users. The final plan of the Carter overall, I'll call it master plan, will be checked by committee members to make sure that it is as per our resolution. But what actually then is going to eventually happen is the next level of consultation. Well, that plan will slip into actually a plan of management for the whole area that actually has to be done. That plan is only for one stage. Is that what you were thinking?
Yes.
It's the users to make sure that everything's right with what we're going to put out for.
That's the main thing. The users have got to be satisfied and happy with what we're.
For the kiosk and amenities. Yes.
And looking at the draft plan that carried out the other at the community, very impressive. And just a reminder that we've done away with one of the toilets because we've moved the amenities block over east, basically close to the skate park. So we lose a toilet, but the toilet's going to be on the end of the amenities block. Will be internal toilets as well. Plan was pretty impressive.
30 metres by 15 in size. And there was some survey work that had happened to make sure we could fit it as per where we moved it to.
So, yes, so mapping will come back imminently. After discussion with the floor plan for the kiosk building, which we have funding for, and the tender will go out, and we'll that and get another precinct, the Carter Oval precinct, up and running. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Any further comments, questions regarding this point? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to clarify that later in the meeting we'll be talking about some of the proposed infrastructure and amenities improvements that we haven't been able to fund. For example, I've sort of seen a club room for swimmers at the pool, and then that money was not forthcoming that we applied for. Are those items still on the action list or agenda, or are those things you say, okay, we can't get them, so we need to move forward with what we can get?
No, they'll remain on the list of the things that we continue to have a list of worthwhile projects that we will apply for grant funding. And that's the only way that things like the swimming club building, for instance, can be funded. And we've also applied for a refurbishment of the whole entrance and change rooms at the swimming pool. And again, that wasn't successful, but that doesn't mean they go off the list. You know, they stay there. Go again and again and again. And eventually, Councillor Jackson, as you will see, all these projects have happened in the same way. You plan them, they're ready to go. When we apply for a grant, we're unsuccessful, we apply again with the next round or some other form. And eventually you get there. They don't get lost. Thank you. Anything further on this Water Facilities Committee meeting? Nothing further. We'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Meeting of the Economic Development and Promotion Committee held on that, same afternoon. Councillor Derrick, happy to move that. Councillor Jackson. Councillor Derrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess firstly, it might look like we didn't achieve very much because most of the items have been tabled and continue on for the next meeting, but there was certainly a lot of robust discussion. So we were joined by Kate Milner and Schroeder Whitfield from Riversmart, who gave a presentation to the committee that was slightly more extended version of what we received today, and there was a lengthy discussion around that, lots of questions asked, a lot of ground covered there, and there is a summary of that in the minutes as well. Owen Closey was with us on the video link. He unfortunately has moved on to another role, but I can certainly say he's been excellent to work with. And it's a sad loss for us that he has moved on. So that business development facilitator role is then re-advertised. We had Yvette Lloyd on the meeting as well. So she's from the Department of Regional New South Wales, involved in the recruitment for Owen's replacement. Owen has given us some great insights and lots of information that we can take forward, and has very kindly offered to make himself available to us to reaffirm anything in the documents he's created for us, and I guess to be a point of contact when needed for the new person. So I guess mainly in relation to the strategy and the plan, there was a lot of discussion around that. Owen explained his thinking. I think everything we discussed is basically encapsulated, and the feedback that he gave to us is really encapsulated in that strategy and plan. So it's his observations and his insights from the time that he has spent in wine, and I think it's definitely refreshing to see things from an outsider's perspective. Someone who's come in with a clean sheet of paper and created these documents for us, and I'm really happy with what we've received. And again, it's just a shame that it won't be over that we'll be working with moving forward on these, but hopefully we'll have something new in place very soon. That's about it. As I mentioned, there are most of the items to be tabled and continued on for the next meeting because the robust discussion did extend out to a time that we had to call the meeting closed. If anyone has any questions, or if any of the other committee members have anything to add to that.
Thank you, Councillor Derrick. Any further comments, please? Councillor Jackson.
Dear Mr. Mayor, one of the things that we did talk about that's in there under the dot point training tourism officer, for example, is council giving consideration to having the capability to do tourism and promoting and marketing of wine, in that sense of wine being offering in order to attract interested investors, and some of the bits of infrastructure work, for example, access to marshes, that would need to, you need to resolve those matters in order to attract meaningful investment in something like accommodation or a tour operator bringing parties up here, and not just for the marshes,
because that's just one asset. But for anything else that people might have going on here, their cafes, shopping precinct, the museum, the murals that are about to be put right through the town, and at the outer points of the Shire as well, Colin and Liverpool. So that was certainly something that I think, and in my opinion, the committee were very much in favour of looking at.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor, any further comments, councillors, questions? If nothing further, we'll put that at the meeting of the Economic Development Committee held on Wednesday, 16. All those in favour? Yes, carried. Moving on to the meeting of the Water and Sewerage Committee held the next day, Thursday the 17th. Someone happy to move those minutes and recommendations? Thank you, Councillor Higgins. Second, Councillor Kinsey, Councillor Higgins.
The meeting was reasonably short, but some of the things that come to light were the grants for the upgrade of the chlorination systems at Nevertire and Colli, the crews have provided a better quality of water. Our river pump at Oxley Park has failed again, and we can't get it out into river drops. But we've got a right Mason on there. It's got wait for the river drop, he's going to change it so we can go back to the old system from that water. The other problem was the Colli Moor, because of 6-inch casing, we can only get a shaft-driven pump in it. You can't get submersible to lift the water high enough from 190 feet, and the shaft is sheared. There are spiders in it. Yeah. So, going to replace with a phosphorus brass boom.
So you can say the current unit has a 92 metre long section shaft that has a motor at the top and the pump end 92 metres below the surface. It bolts together in 1.5 metre sections, supported by rubber bushes to support that 92 metre long drive shaft. All of those bushes were completely worn, and so they will be replaced with phosphor bronze bushes, which should give a much better lifespan. And some other minor issues will be addressed as they were pulling the pump out of the ground. As the flanges were coming to light, some of them had started to separate. One of them in particular only had 2 bolts holding the flange together. So there was a whole range of issues that will be corrected and work done to try to prevent those issues in the future.
Thank you, I think. The question for perhaps Managed Finance Administration, was that part of the suite of works that was undertaken with the design of Mr. Swan?
It was undertaken under the Restart 357
Yeah.
security for the Regents project, which is the 3 boards. Initially, they put a test bore out on the other side of the bridge at Colli.
Yes.
Trying to bring the bore closer to town.
Yes.
They couldn't find water. And knowing that the old bore was on LLS or land, that's why it was drilled on the road reserve, so we could get it on to council property, if you like. And there was, I don't know what the reasoning was, but there was a reasoning that the bore was drilled at the diameter that it was. And we knew that we had issues with not being able to put a pump down there and had to get a whole different type of system to use it. I don't know what the reason why it was, but it was a reason for it. I guess I don't know.
I'm trying to recall too, I want you to remember that, yeah.
Up to my time. Just in light of that, so where is Colleen in regards to water supply now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, currently Colli is being supplied by the old bore that's coming on the LLS.
Polyclinic connection to
the main itself?
Yeah, it's running through the meter as if it was coming out of the new bore. So we're keeping the NRA happy and New South Wales Water happy as far as metering.
Councillor Bruce?
Question, what's the warranty on when that was put in? Like, did it run out? It's only for a year or 2 years, is it normally? But that's sort of the stuff that's
Warranty on the equipment, I wouldn't have a clue, but probably been in for longer than that.
Yes.
We've been in for 5 or 6 years.
Yes.
the actual bores being in there, but the warranty certainly didn't come off.
And the pumping plant, I think, has been there for at least about 16, I think.
Yeah. We went to a meeting, we inspected it on the way out to the Hollow meeting, which is some little time ago, yeah.
Yeah, it's the scope that's the problem. I think there's a chance it will cost not much more to put a 10-inch casing down than a 6-inch. And having the same type of submersible pump that we've got at our 4 here.
Just to be, the design was done out of ex-discount. Yeah, outside consultants, so that's, we were guided by them. As I recall it, and obviously, you know, Council Station does as well, so, and we just, perhaps in history, we might come in some minutes somewhere why we actually chose, Joan, do you think?
I had a bit of a look. I couldn't really tell.
Can't find it there.
Mr. Mayor, I did have a conversation with folks who did correctly tell me that it was a different pump.
Yes.
But that was there was no other information forthcoming. He said there was a reason that it couldn't be done the same as the others, but he didn't have an answer as to why.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I think, short of doing another bore ourselves, we're stuck with what we have, and we just have to try to make the best of what we have for future.
Thank you for that. Councillor Kinsey. Councillor Kinsey.
Mr. Mayor, I would suggest that if it gets fixed, and there's back to where it was originally, with the there's some bushes in it, and the piles of game, then we just really throw the hat in the ring. Do something different, because I've got a board that delivers 1 million litres a day. It's pumping 60 metres, probably pumping on a 6 metre head, plus it pumps that water nearly 2 kilometres. So, really comfortable on what you're doing in Collar. I haven't had any issues at all. This thing's been running for 5 years without any problems whatsoever.
Submersible and a 10-inch.
Submersible, yeah. I don't understand why it was set up like that.
That's the question we're probably going back to Councillor Kinsey, is we've done in a different way to every other.
I mean, there'd be a reason for it, no doubt.
Thank you, mate. The total head for that's required out of that pump is 149 metres.
Yeah, that's a fair head.
It's a fair head, and because it's an 8 kilometre run of piping, there's the 92 metre vertical lift, 8 kilometres of piping, then a 15 metre lift to the tanks, and then when you include all the frictional losses and so through the pipework, we're at 149 metres. So it's a substantial lift.
Thank you. Councillor Kinsey, yes.
That's a big ask for one submersible ball. Yeah, so you think 3 pumps to do that.
It's the second half, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for the information. Councillor Higgins?
Just one other thing, the treatment works, just waiting for PO approval to be handed over to us.
Right. Thank you. And when, so that's imminent then? Yeah, everything else is in place, as I understand it, just waiting for the EPA.
That's good. Can hand it over to the Commissioner, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Any further comments, questions regarding the water and sewage committee meeting? Councillor Jackson?
I think, just item 7.4, talking about the issue of asset ownership, sewage and stormwater drainage system, which I'm taking to be a formal position, stated position to the community on where council's demarcation ends, and they then become responsible for, say, a pipe running from a main through to their house. Is there, it's sort of we provided in the near future, is there any time frame for this policy to be developed? Because it also says perhaps future public education. Are these things that may happen, or are these things that you've actually sort of scheduled to happen at a point when you have resources to it?
I'll have to address that to the Division Manager Engineering Services.
Yes, it is something, your explanation is correct. It is where the demarcation line is of ownership and responsibilities between household and council. Currently, the Australian standard says that where that line is determined by the authority. Here we are the authority. There's just no definitive answer in any of our policies that says this is where the line is. There was an old policy that was superseded sometime before I got here and replaced with a new one that doesn't actually cover that particular item. So we had an informal discussion on the day of the meeting about where that line should be. I will do a report based on the conversations of that committee meeting to make that formal.
Normally it's from the junction, which is supplied to the house.
And I would just ask, do you have a time frame for that report to be delivered? I know you have a list of a lot of items, but does that one have a time frame where you plan to have that report to us by?
Mr. Mayor, not a definitive answer at the moment, but I would hope, if not the next meeting, the following Water and Sewer Committee meeting.
Certainly, Councillor Crossley.
I can remember going back in Alan Murdoch's time. There was a report presented to council, I think with respect to exactly this problem, in terms of where council's responsibility starts and finishes, and when the landowner's responsibility starts and finishes. And I can remember it was in the yellow pages of the business paper, and there are actually two drawings that I think that were actually in the report that I can visually remember. So Alan, whatever year that was, I don't know, but it was Alan Murdoch's time.
Mayor, what was also said is that there's no real concern at the moment because we are following previous practice. But it'd be nice to have eventually a resolved position of the council. That's it.
Thank you for that. Any further comments or questions regarding the minutes of the Water and Sewage Committee meeting? Anything further? With that, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Moving on to the minutes of the Town Improvement Committee held on the same day. Councillor Taylor, you happy to move that? Seconded. Councillor Derrick. Councillor Taylor.
Moving the main point of the recommendations for the Bournemouth Cemetery expansion. We've got your photos and plans in front, and the manager of engineering services to lead going with. First stage is done for phase 3, if I'm correct. Basically a mirror image of what's over there, but the main point is this photo here is the existing family plots, which you can see in the cemetery is take up a lot of room. Manager of engineering services has redesigned those. That's on this particular page, this top one here. This family plot. And they take up a lot less room. Obviously, the big point that we have a big trouble down there is the complaints about water laying around excess, lack of drainage. That will certainly be addressed when this is developed. Just the other points that come out of the meeting were that there'll be a further plan for the CBD presented at the next committee meeting, and that plan then, once we really want to workshop it with the whole council to make sure we get it right, over every detail before it gets submitted out then for public consultation. That's about all I have. If there are any questions directed to the Manager of Engineering Service?
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Jackson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to point out part of that plan is that the concept of having a memorial wall or a bench wall that divisional manager engineering services came up with, and I thought that was a fantastic idea to keep in mind when, you know, as the cemetery facility expands. That would be a great asset, I think, to the cemetery facility.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions regarding the county improvement? Nothing further, we'll put that all those in favour, against carried. Moving on, sorry, item 7, it's the reports to council, and those being the delegate reports, there are none of those. Moving on to the policy area, item 1 of the policy area is the local approved policies. Councillor, is the councillor happy to move that? Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Seconded, Councillor Derrick. Councillor Jackson.
I didn't have any comments to make.
So this is effectively to put this policy out for public consultation for 28 days. The recommendation is there. Nothing further on item 1 of the policy area. That being the case, with that, all those in favour, against, carried. On item 2, which is a review of the code of conduct and procedures of the administration of the Warrandyte Council's code of conduct. Someone happy to move that? Councillor Jackson. Second, Councillor Cruz. Councillor Jackson.
Again, no further comment to make in regards to that.
The code of conduct and the procedure for the administration of the code of conduct in our induction compendium, so as it was. So
It's designed to fit into one
compendium. Thank you. Nothing further on item 2 of the policy area. We'll put that all those in favour. Against, carried. Moving on to item 3, review of the council expense policy. I'm happy to move that. Councillor Taylor. Seconded, Councillor Bruce. Councillor Taylor.
Move the recommendations, Mayor.
Any comments, questions regarding the review of the council expenditure policy? No. Nothing further, we'll put that. All those in favour? Against, carried. And final item of the policy area, review of the gifts and benefits policy. I have to move that. Councillor Taylor, Councillor Derrick. Councillor Taylor.
Going to move the recommendations, Mayor.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions on item 4, the review of the gifts and benefits policy? Being nothing further, we'll put that. All those in favour? Against, carried. Moving on to the reports of the General Manager. First of those being the outstanding reports checklist. Note the number of items there to be asterisk or asterisk to come off that that list. Someone happy to move the outstanding reports checklist? Councillor Jackson, second. Councillor Walker, Councillor Jackson.
Yes, just to move that recommendation.
Question perhaps to the General Manager. How close are we to moving along with the airport building and two toilets in the CBD? Well, no, one in the CBD, one at Lion Park. First question is, of the Lions Club, are they actually agreed to that amount of money?
at the present, seriously verbally.
Okay.
In fact, they asked for a copy of the letters again, to probably write back to us and thank us and say yes, I would hope. They've actually verbally said yes. I think the President and the Secretary have both said yes. And so that's actually going ahead, and we've actually got the draft plans of Lions Park. Staff are looking at it at the moment, and we've made a decision on the standard of toilet block for Lions Park. And one of the jobs that eventually will happen quickly to the Byron Public Arts is the special covering on that facility. It's required to be a design done for that is reasonably arty. We're still working on the main CBD of getting the specs right and document right.
So when do we expect that to go to tender then?
Hopefully both rotation, second one. We're how close was he? Within a month he was going to have it out for quotation. This one here may be the same, but I can't guarantee it.
Nice just to see those underway. Thank you. Any further comments or questions regarding action checklist that been managed? Sorry, Councillor Walker.
Thank you. It's the industrial manager of engineering services. I was just wondering about the coronations. We're trying to update those, and I noticed on page 8 that a briefing note provided to Lord Butler in January 2022. Is that to just make us aware that we're trying to get some funding for this project?
Yes, we've submitted three briefing notes to the local member asking for funds, three lots of emergency funding for the chlorination, the telemetering upgrade, and
Colli storage.
The first part of the Colli water storage facility amendments, and then as part of that briefing note, there was a second request for funds that wasn't urgent funding to allow us to build the new water tower to supply the water, the pressure into the network. So they were submitted to the.
Not quite right. So, second part is actually trying to make the facility potable. So yes, just supply and storage at Colli. Stage 1, please give us some urgent funding. Stage 2 is a special plant, small plant that should do for small villages that makes it potable. And we've done we've expanded on those briefing notes. We're talking to Minister Anderson, the man who actually can fund it, early next week.
So they were originally done because the local member was going to come and pay a visit. He didn't make it because he was exposed to it.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
So let's say a little short of $1.5 million in total to carry out those 4 projects.
Thank you.
Any further comments, questions regarding the acting checklist, item 1 of the General Manager's report? Being nothing further, we'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Moving on to item 2, and in recognition of Warren being a healthy town and give awareness of a healthy lifestyle, Councillor standing now going to item 2 of the General Manager's report, and that report is the committee delegates meetings. Someone happy to move those? Councillor Jarrett, second. Councillor Walker. Councillor Derrick.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple to add to the future meetings. The Northwestern Library Co-op ATM on the 2nd of March, and an interagency meeting on the 3rd of March. And future dates for interagency will be confirmed to be added to the calendar for the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Derrick. Any further comments, questions? Councillor Walker.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I noticed the 21st of the 1st, Chris Goldstone Strategic Directions Group. I'm not filming in a bit on
Mr. Mayor, that was a meeting with some consultants that are doing some work with some neighbouring councils and just investigating with us, and asked us about some ITC improvements that we could need or may not need in the future.
Yes.
Sorry, also, as adding to the second, it's been mentioned that the consultation with government agencies, the strategic plan was mentioned yesterday in the chat, but they just giving you ideas on what you need to do in the meeting.
They're actually really kind of telling us what they've done and what they want to do in the future, and seeing that information's now all with us. The 25 presentations of the wonderful work that those government departments are doing, Councillor. And we'll find some time to actually have a further look at them and see if there's anything interesting that slips into our documentation.
Councillor Jackson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just the meeting that was on the 25th of January, that was the inspection of the Beamole Heritage Site and Trail with the Warren Local Aboriginal Lands Council CEO, Jody Redmond. What was that actually for? What was the purpose and what was the outcome?
Council received some correspondence on talking about the condition of that facility, and I organised a meeting with the CEO and the chair of the Warren Aboriginal Lands Council to see what help we could do. I've got a little bit of heritage money that's available that we might be able to help them.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Sorry, there's a board meeting for Outback Arts taking place, I believe it's 28th of March, this March. I'm not sure if that should be listed on there as well.
That's why Macquarie County Council's on the 28th of February too, so I'll beat Councillor McKenzie and Councillor Burrell.
Any further comments, questions regarding the committee and delegates meetings held or forthcoming? Nothing further, we'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Please be seated. Moving on to the manager's report pertaining to the work in progress report and the infrastructure project. Someone happy to move that quite comprehensive list? Councillor Derrick, thank you for that. Second, Councillor Kinsey. Councillor Derrick.
No questions, thank you. Just making recommendations from there.
Yeah, and I think
It's up to date, it's great.
I believe that's correct, Councillor Walker and Councillor Bruce's committee program race course to all those, or a lot of those items that at least listed there in quite good detail. So that's Councillor Jackson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just wondering if committees such as I mentioned before, the swimming club, clubhouse that had we hoped to fund through grants and it's unsuccessful. Is there an ongoing stakeholder communication with interested parties or users to say that, by the way, we didn't get that, we've still got it on the board, or talk about options? Is that something that does happen as part of this process?
Certainly, over the years, we're certainly aware that there needs to be a new clubhouse because there isn't one, and we certainly need a $990,000 new amenities and kiosk block. I would hope, so that's why the applications have been made, because it's come from committees that are involved in those knowing what users want.
Yeah, look, it's part of the master plan, and so it sits there as part of the master plan, comes through the Sporting Facilities Committee. It's just an ongoing thing there, Councillor Jackson, it sits there. I don't believe that the swimming club are actually told, no, that was unsuccessful, but what we need to do is we just keep applying. And so, if you apply to every, you see all sorts of unsuccessful grants, if we reply all the time, unsuccessful, well, it's just, it becomes a little bit of a tedious thing. They're not lost, is probably the point. And my belief is we just keep talking about them when if you say, okay, this is the detail of how this is all working, and yeah, I think we can make a rod for our own back to a certain extent. The swimming club understand completely that we're going to keep applying for those grants and the amenities and kiosk areas, but also, yeah, I don't think it's lost. That's definitely that helps answer your question. Anything further, item 3, the General Manager's report pertaining to the works progress and the infrastructure projects we're being undertaken?
Mayor, I will say that one side issue that we will bring up with the Minister for Regional Roads and Transport, Minister for Regional Transport and Roads, I think, stand far away, is where he could try to find some money if our Regional Tourism Activation Fund for the Burrama Walkway Access Roads system. Because what came from the Economic Development and Promotions Committee and Owen Posse saying it's a risk for a really important attraction for Warren Shire. It's going to be the best attraction, and a whole number of days it could be not available because it's an unsealed road into the place. And so that's one of the things that we hopefully will, on a side issue, talk to them about. I believe the government is looking for those types of projects, and we hope that something like that happens. Because we are still waiting on that. If you look at page 35, we're still waiting for some advice on those two of them are very important projects for Warren Shire, because that centre over at 1 Canamble Road, Canamble Road would be fantastic if it had an access road, a car park and an access road out. Yeah.
Thank you. Any further on item 3, the General Manager's report regarding infrastructure projects? Being nothing further, put that, all those in favour? Against, carried. Moving on to item 4, General Manager's report. Local infrastructure program, round 3, and pertaining to the community infrastructure projects that may be part of that. Someone happy to move that recommendation of where the community allocation of around $300,000 was to go. Remembering, of course, this is federal government funding, so it's local roads, community infrastructure funding. We nationally nominated $1 million out of the 1.310 or so it was to roads, and putting aside the other $300,000. $10,000 aside for community infrastructure, and then there was a whole list that was in here, and Mannix and various committees have put forward their best option for the use of that money, and this is what's come out of that. So what we're asking for is that to be endorsed as we move forward. So I'm probably needing someone to move this, move the recommendation, and then a seconder. Councillor Bruce, happy to move it. Councillor Kinsey, second. Councillor Bruce.
Yeah, I'm happy to move this recommendation. I suppose we need to have a chat about it, but I certainly am in favour of the questioning area. I think we've got to try and get that finished so that the user groups can be able to use that. So I'm in favour. update on that one. And the other ones, a lot of it's safety that needs to be done. And the solar panels was all going to be cost effective in the long run, so. Yep.
Mr. Mayor, the last one will need some help. We're hoping to get a possible meaning that Lawrence Sporting and Cultural Centre sound mix system and extended vehicles, just so everyone's aware of that. Doesn't quite, the 9,572 doesn't quite cover the cost.
So can I just ask you, what part will that cover?
It doesn't do the job properly.
I know, but is it?
So all those lovely ladies who collect the $10 at the union and collecting it well and truly. But you don't have half a system, you have to actually have the whole system.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that organisation needs to be informed of what the dollars are that we're going to ask for. Yeah. So that they've got a handle on it. And do we have an indicative cost or not?
14.
Total? 14 extra?
14, oh, no. Total.
14 total.
14 to 15,000.
Okay.
5,000 about is
It's a rough, the gap, okay. Yeah. So just putting in picture that what the general manager is alluding to there is in the last point, the self-speak system needs a bit of work because it doesn't, the sound's not directed at the Sporting and Cultural Centre out onto the oval. Well, if you're standing under the front of the building, you actually can't hear particularly well. You can hear lots of other places. And what the general manager is proposing is that the rugby union club make a contribution of the order of 5,000 to make sure it's done properly. So we'll have to talk with them about that, particularly. And sorry, the other question just before I take Councillor Taylor's question, or it might be on the same page.
Just a question on that. Sorry, I missed it.
Yes.
You're talking about the outside speaker system, right?
Yes.
Has anyone tested it lately?
Going to the
Just the reason being that when the plumber Fielding Smith had his scaffolding up there, because the two speakers were pushed out to the right, so I asked him to push one back into the middle, which he had to unscrew and actually push it into the middle.
Yes.
I thought the undertaking while we have the scaffolding there, so that's why I'm asking whether anyone's tested to see if it's improved.
I don't know the answer to Councillor Taylor, and we've given the impression, I have to say, Councillor Taylor, before this meeting, that wasn't possible. So now that has been possible.
Well, he said he had to unscrew it now because of the downpipe, I think, because it was out that way. And he said he was going to do it. We did a lot of that note. That's really, I just thought while he was there, I'll make an executive decision and see if he can have a crack at it.
Happy to see if that is rectified the problem to a certain extent, but we need it.
So if it's then not required, we'll have to spend it elsewhere.
Just go and see one of them's turning back in facing basically the middle of the street.
Thank you for that information. Very good. The other question I was going to go to Councillor Taylor, that you raised about exporting facilities meeting was the solar panels, and we've got here with the works depot, whether that is broad enough to you can see that broad area in the fourth, that area, to defer to Management Finance Administration, whether that was probably not going to be unlikely to cover a swimming pool, etc., is it as well?
Through there, the figures that come from there were from a model that come through and just done a quick quote for it, went and had a look at the complex of here and the depot. So I really don't know. I didn't even know if you can get solar panels from put on the water or generate electricity. So there was thoughts about putting in some out of the still pressure plant as well, things like that. So I think there's ample opportunity, but I wouldn't have a purpose of costing.
So do you think it's more appropriate just to suggest that solar panels on council facilities
Work step on another oval.
Yeah, just is that a reasonable way to go? Just so we've got some broadness in it, as opposed to been very too specific.
But I think these ones here were going to go onto the workshop.
They're definite, so we've got,
That's all they looked at was the workshop.
okay, so there's no room in there, judges taking that off. We work we can cover over, but there's no real scope for that in terms of the dollars available.
No,
We wouldn't.
not for this project.
That's fine.
That was the rough costings that was given to me some time ago by a different firm.
Yep.
To put it on, actually on the work schedule itself. And on this building here itself as well, so they have to come and measure what they could do, and they come back and they also done one for the complex there. So that's where the figures come from, so I'm hoping that we can still go out to the vendor panel and get some for,
Just for you, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I actually received a phone call yesterday from the company that are going to come out next week and do an audit on all council-owned buildings for the purpose of solar panels. So they're involved with the big project over parks.
Give that discussion.
Those two are the major users of electricity and have a pay, and pays it back.
During the day.
Yeah.
Yes, so that it makes good sense. I'm just saying that, well, we can go with it, that's fine, we've got a budget for constraints, and that's what it is. Councillor Walker, question?
Councillor Drews, I should say, sorry. This money, the equestrian arena, will that cover, you think that a lot, it needs more money, obviously, will that cover so that it does get finished and to the standard that's required?
To help council Bruce, yes.
Yes,
It helps with some contingency, they're starting to be eaten into, and the two major things that are off the list until this is allocated, which is a concrete path around 2/3 of it, and the annex area, properly gravelled and sealed. They were the two items that couldn't be afforded within the budget, and now that should be done.
It's noted in the notes there, a bit further along, Councillor Walker, that it should be to complete the project to a satisfactory standard, so, yeah. Okay, thank you. Any further comments, questions regarding the allocation of funds with the community infrastructure projects out of the local roads, community infrastructure grant funding? If nothing further, we'll put that, all those in favour? Carried. Moving on to which we dealt with at our workshop yesterday, is integrated planning and reporting, framework, documentation, action plan. Given our discussions yesterday, someone happy to move the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Brewer. Second, Councillor Walker, Councillor Brewer.
I just moving the recommendations, thanks. We had a fairly comprehensive discussion on it yesterday. And it's a requirement to have it reviewed. So.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, very good suggestion to have, there's going to be a secondary table that will show all the important dates where councillors have to attend, if possible, matters. Because it's very helpful then, apart from all my bookings that I've sent to all of you.
Looking at the street there, Mr. General Manager.
I missed that.
I think part of our responsibility is to just try and have community awareness. And what I'm meaning by that is we talk to people and say, let's look towards 2035. You know, it's like to see Warren at that time. And I think that's our starting point for that. That community meeting, which was what day of March? 17th of March. Is there anything further on item 5 regarding integrated planning and reporting, documentation action plan. Seeing nothing further, we'll put that, all those in favour, against, carried. Moving on to the reports of the Division Manager of Finance Administration, first of those being the reconciliation certificate. I'm happy to move that. Thank you, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Walker, Councillor Jackson.
I have nothing further to add. Doctor's recommendation.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Nothing further, we'll put item, oh, sorry, Councillor Fox.
Just going to suggest you might put your money under your Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, exactly.
be interested.
Exactly, yes, exactly. It's a different time, Councillor Crosby, than a few years ago. And it does, I mean, it seriously does impact our ability to do things. When we're earning a couple $100,000 in interest in the year, it was certainly a bonus, and that time is gone, for the minute anyway. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Any further comments, questions regarding item 1, the reconciliation certificate? If nothing further, put that, all those in favour, against, carried. Moving on to item 2, the Manager of Finance Administration report, that being the statement of rates and annual charges. Someone happy to move those? Councillor Kinsey. Second, Councillor Bosky, Councillor Kinsey.
Just received and noted, Mr. Mayor, it's pretty well in shape today.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? No, put that, all those in favour, against, carried. Moving on to item 3, with the Division Manager of Finance Administration's report, I note Councillor Derrick, as per the registration disclosure of pecuniary interest, is leaving the meeting. Thank you. Someone happy to move the recommendation? Councillor Walker, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Walker.
No, I'm happy to move the recommendation. Thank you.
Questions to the Manager of Finance Administration by Mike. Couple, give you a room, have we heard anything back from those contractors?
Through me, nothing, and I haven't chased, Blake up, so I'll probably be pretty busy, but I won't chase him.
And can you tell me a little bit about the doorways to the open air library? Is that an internal rearrangement, or is it?
Pretty clearly, it's about creating the outdoor space.
Yeah.
So people can come out and read their books and access Wi-Fi. It's an application to the state library out of their building grant, which is all 100% funded. So, just being come up with the idea that, then we try to make sure it looks in the same as with the master plan for town improvements. So if it's successful, then we'd have to come back forward as to how it would be constructed there.
Has that been successful or not?
No, they have just gone in.
It's only just gone in, yeah, right, yeah, right.
The pictures went to town improvement,
Yes,
thoughts, and
That's
then,
what I was in last, actually, that's it.
because a little bit of tie-in with the CBD, resigns.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any further questions, comments on item 3 of the Division Manager of Finance Administration report? All those in favour? Against, carried. Thanks. Councillor Derrick has rejoined the meeting. Moving on to item 4, the Division Manager of Finance Administration's report relating to the 22-23 operation plan, estimates and timetable. Note the recommendation there. Someone happy to move that recommendation? Councillor Kinsey, seconding Councillor Walker. Councillor Kinsey.
Looks a bit full on, Mr. Mayor. I move the recommendation. Thank you.
So the first important thing is Wednesday, 13th of April, go through the draft operational plan.
Oh, estimates.
Estimates.
Really estimates.
Oh, sorry.
We'll still be working on
estimates,
it, on
okay.
on the table.
Yeah, no, okay. And you? Questions regarding item 4? Nothing further, we'll put that, all those in favour? Against, carried. Item 5, preparation of the draft 22-23 estimates. And that relates to the IPART increase of 1.3%, which is less than ideal, but it is. Yes, 0.7. Started off with 0.0, and then the population, I might get referred to you, Financial Finance, if you want to know about how we added the 0.6.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure where the IPART left out. The big we've had an increase in population or projected population from ABS, which is all factored in. And you'll see then they've actually deducted a 0.1 for increases in supplementary valuations, which basically means when people sell their property or split their property, we get 2 lots of new valuations come in. So I think they're thinking, well, that increases the value of the Shire, so you're getting more money, so therefore you don't need as much for a population change, so we'll take that off. So they've gone from a 0.7, which I don't know how the calculations work, minus 0.1 to give us a 0.6, which we can take up on top of our 0.7, which the rest of the state that didn't have a population increase will be allowed to give up.
Thank you.
That's I just don't believe it. Anyway, let's hope no other of our prices go up more than 1.3%.
Exactly. So, no matter what, we've also got the materials and inputs going up, which is more than 1.3. So I think that's another thing we just need to be speaking with ministers about, is how we can expect to be operated in much tighter constraints, budgetary constraints, when it's getting away from us. It doesn't make good sense, and that was the whole reason. Well, the reasoning in the review of councils that they were financially unsustainable. Well, this is a big way of helping us become financially unsustainable if you don't increase our potential to increase general rates at the same rate as inflation and with wages. Anyway, it is what it is, and we'll deal with it the best we can. Thank you. Anything further on item 5? Sorry? No, I haven't moved, sorry. Goodness, my apologies. Mover? Councillor Walker? Councillor Bruce, sorry. My apologies. Having jumped in front of ourselves, any comments, questions regarding item 5? No, nothing further, we'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Moving on to item 6, the payment of superannuation for councillors.
Mayor, would you like me to try to
If that's okay. Councillor Jackson, you got your hand up. The recommendation is only that it's submitted for council determination, so we really probably need to come to some sort of view on what that. Councillor Carter, do you have, Councillor Jackson, first, do you have something that you want?
I just had something to say along the lines of the discussions we've had that keeping the option of having superannuation for those who wish to, which is called the middle ground, not increasing the budget and then allowing councils to decide if they want to reduce their allowance by the amount of superannuation contribution or not.
So is that where you're going?
I was going to go for option 2, being the motion.
Yep. Let's tidy it up and you first. So let's.
Jody, that council introduce the payment of superannuation contributions to councillors from 1st July 2022, with the superannuation contribution being deducted from the mayor and councillor allowance, with each individual councillors determining whether to take up the ability to have superannuation. So with each individual councillor determining whether they take up the ability to have superannuation. Darren, now you tidying me up, please?
No, I think that the part of that is that council introduced the option of payment of superannuation. It's not.
No, you actually, you have to actually make a decision that you have introduced. Number 2 is to actually have introduced the payment of superannuation contributions, and then it's entirely up to the council, individual councillor.
Okay, right. Yeah, sorry.
With each individual councillor determining whether they wish to take up the ability to have superannuation. That then allows any other councillors for the future.
Right. Okay.
And because what that does is the superannuation and their allowance are all in the same budget.
Yep.
They only get an allowance, or they get a little bit of super and a smaller amount of smaller allowance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
That last bit, with the ability to.
Whether to utilise, whether to use, or
Yes.
Or opt-in, because it's an opt-in, but not an opt-out, is that right?
To having superannuation payments within the allowance.
Yeah, since you've done that part, we've doubled it up. With each individual council, you determine whether they
Take up the option of having superannuation patients within their allowance.
No, get their allowance.
Take up the option.
Yeah. Take each individual council determine whether they take up this option. You can put this option as opposed to the option there.
You already said payment.
Yeah, you can leave the rest of it out, Joe, I believe. Yeah.
Is it, do you have to make sure that it's opt-in, because if you don't opt-in, you automatically don't get it, as finance administration explained, you have to, if you don't practically provide your letter, so it's not opt-in, you must opt-in, you have to be proactive, you can't just assume when you join council automatically you're going to get super.
No, isn't that correct? You don't put it in by the 1st of July saying that you don't want to get, you're automatically.
You automatically opt out if you don't put in, give it to the DA super account.
Yeah, so Mr. Mayor, if I'm not, if council is not notified, or I'm not notified by each individual councillor of their complying fund, superannuation fund, by law from this act, I cannot deduct So basically, it's up to the councillor, Bob, to notify the council or myself
No, I can't know that.
of all the account details so we can set it up.
Councillor Taylor, are you happy to, with that as the,
Motion.
yes. Oh, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Taylor, Councillor Jackson.
Sorry.
Yes.
I'm just thinking, looking at what we're saying, we should take up this option. They take up this option by notifying the divisional manager of finance and administration
Add to that, yep.
prior to the 1st of July.
Yep.
But that might just-
So it would have to be prior to the 1st of July, would it?
But prior to the council meeting in July anyway.
Councillor Taylor, you happy with that? Councillor Jackson, secondly, you happy with that? Councillors, any further discussions, questions? Councillor Kinsey?
If this is ongoing, should we have 2022 then?
We could nearly put for this term of council, could we? Is that what you're suggesting, Councillor Kinsey? Yeah.
Next council might
Make
make
it-
accountability, so
Yeah. We can put it, just another sentence saying, what's the effect of this stands for this term of council.
This is current.
The recommendation, that's right, you're right, Jody, you can, this stands. I think it's a bit untidy, the wording.
This is current.
Is it prior to the council?
Okay,
It's
right.
in.
It's in forever to say that, okay, yes, we will allow the payment of superannuation contributions.
Yep.
And it will come from the current allowance until such time as any other council decides
To
to
change
take
it.
it over it, change it to the addition of, or whatever. I think that was just pretty normal.
Okay, so you think we're not required to that last sentence then? Yeah, yeah, okay.
I just suggest that you take out the 1st of July because it's already up there that that's coming in on the 1st of July. Do we need to have a date?
They don't
Then that'll be ongoing.
But they don't keep the allowance. Yeah, no, they have to, the advice has to be in before. I think is the intent of that, the second part. Councillor Bruce? Yep. Councillor Jackson?
Through Mr Mayor, one would imagine that this would be managed through councillor induction processes anyway, that they get a form to fill out and they get to tick to say, and all that. And secondly, is this something that a councillor opts into at the start of their term or at the beginning of every financial year?
That's just, I think it's what the Sanctuary Administrator's saying, that's how it is now. And once you've opted in, you're in until you say you're out. And the same thing with it, a new council term they would have to nominate what they're doing, the same as anyone.
Mr Mayor, but if the current councillor said, not this year, I'm not going to, at the start of the next financial year, within the council term, could they change their mind, or once you've selected at the start of the term, that's through, carries the rest of the term?
But through Mr. Mayor, 4C of the Act allows them to do that, I mean, yeah, otherwise I think you'd make it all in
Yeah.
They can actually write to council and say, I don't want to, have superannuation anymore. It's kind of, that's what the 4ABC allows them to do. And if they don't nominate them, they don't get anything. See,
Well, they get deducted.
yeah, they don't get deducted. Yeah.
Very good, Councillor Taylor, Councillor, any right of reply? No. Anything further on the item 6 of the, Division 1 Finance Administration report regarding the payment of superannuation for councillors? Nothing further, we'll put that, all those in favour, against, carried. Moving on to item 7, the librarian report. Someone has to move that. Councillor Derrick, second. Councillor Briggs, Councillor Derrick.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just happy to move the report. I think it details quite well the activities that the library staff undertake. Always provide a great service, and there's lots of things they do as outreach as well, which I think is an excellent way to get out to the community. Nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Derrick. Any further, any comments, questions regarding the librarian report? Nothing further, put that, all those in favour, against, carried. Moving on to item 8, the Division and Finance Administration report regarding the December 21 budget review. Someone who's going to move that recommendation? Councillor Walker, second, Councillor Kinsey. Councillor Walker. Mr. Manager of Finance Administration, is there anything that you wish to draw council's attention to regarding that December review? It's not, I mean, I think it's quite, well,
No, Mr. Mayor, no, the movement of the vote, I mean, the couple of areas that, are going to be interesting by the time the March review comes around, but I didn't want to make a long stay at this point in time. So basically, I've only bringing in the grant works that have occurred, I suppose, since September review. And the only other thing that I didn't, that was sort of alluded to from the general manager, when it comes to the March 21 emergency works, we spent something like in the order of over $460,000 on those emergency works between local and regional roads. And being notified that our claims being put in and successful, so we will be getting all of that back except for the $35,530. That again will be shown in the March review, hopefully with another big amount to say that we've got some restoration money as well by then. That's crossing fingers.
And of course, our emergency work on roads that are starting to collect up for the November, December, and the running of the emergency levy stuff, which 198,000. So Darren will start to 198,000 very soon. We'll start to add up.
Absolutely. So regarding item 8, any further comments, questions regarding the December 21 budget review? Nothing further, we'll put that, all those in favour? Against, carried. We're moving on to the report of the Division of Management Engineering Services. Item 1 of that report is the works progress report regarding roads. Someone happy to move the recommendation if we've most referred to noted.
Mayor, on page 1, of course, it's actually shown.
We haven't got a delivery second, hang on 2 seconds. Councillor Walker's moved. Second, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Walker.
Yes, I have made the recommendation.
Thank you. General Manager, you had some information?
Just on page one, the figures look much nicer when you get that 425,000, kind of helping here. Because otherwise they were starting to look rather sick.
Can I ask a question of acting as a manager? Grade 3 crew put down, what working elsewhere, or what was happening there? What? Page 2.
On holiday. They were sick.
Is that okay?
Yes.
For you, did you have COVID?
Said on holidays and sick.
Okay, that's fine. Thank
Just
you.
in light of that, Mr. Mayor, given that the circumstances was the grader crew had to be stood down, was there not someone else available that could have taken the grader over for that period of time so that the machine and the pig and the crew could still operate?
No. We would have been, was not the rest of us. So don't forget, this is from the period of the 21st of December to the 6th of February. Some people are on holiday still, some people were sick, and there were, every available man was on every machine that was available at the same time that we were doing 347 construction and other things. Just that particular crew, we couldn't fill it. Just everyone was on holiday, just that holiday time. Wasn't helped with the man being ill.
Thank you for that explanation. Any further comments, questions regarding what's going on with the manufacturing session? Roll back. Let's progress report there. Nothing further, we'll flip that. All those in favour? Against carried. Moving on to item 2, let's progress reports. This time pertaining to town services. Don't have to do that. Councillor Derrick, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Derrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to move the recommendation. Thank you.
There wasn't a previous report, we also tried to do is make sure everyone knows exactly, got some very good descriptions this time of exactly where our traffic counters were compared to other important things like the DAS last time.
Much clearer, thank you for that. Thank you. Discontinued item 2, regarding withdrawal of the contractor at the city. It has to do with the drainage. Can you tell me what's going on there?
Mr. Mayor, we, through that panel, we put an expression of interest out to do the water main extension and the drainage upgrade. But we were awarded to a company out of Dubbo. At the time, he said that he didn't have the capacity then to do it. We put it aside to do it early in the new financial year, this new financial year. When I went back to him around the time that we'd agreed, he declined to take it forward. Right.
And so how are we coping with that?
So I went back out and awarded the water main contract to Splat Plumbing.
Okay.
And we will tidy up and do 4 new V drains down both sides to accommodate that surface drain.
Thank you for that. Any further comments regarding item 2 of the Division Manager of Finance Engineering Services report regarding town services? Nothing further, we'll put that. All those in favour? Against carried. Item 3, Acting Division Manager of Engineering Services report, that's to do with the fleet in the workshop. So I'm happy to move the information you received and noted. Councillor Tarr, you have to move that. Second, Councillor Derrick. Councillor Tarr.
You just move the recommendation.
Any comments, questions regarding the fleet or the workshop? Being nothing further, we'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Moving on to item 4, Division Manager Engineering Service Report regarding expressions of interest for the one vacant community member for the other users of the Showground Racecourse Committee. Councillor Bruce, you're happy to move that. Second one is Councillor Derrick. Councillor Bruce.
Yes, I'm happy to move this recommendation. Mark Beach was the former chairperson of this committee, and with his knowledge of things being involved in this whole process from day dot, so I think he'll be an excellent valuable asset to this committee.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Bruce. Any further comments, questions regarding item 4? Nothing further, put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Manager of Health and Development, first those being the development application approvals. Someone happy to move? Sorry, Councillor Derrick, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Derrick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving the recommendation.
No further comment, question? Put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Moving on to item 2, works progress report from the Manager of Health and Development Services. And have to review the recommendation, information received and noted. Thank you, Councillor Kinsey. Seconded. Councillor Kinsey.
Good to see things happening, Mr. Mayor. Move the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Kinsey. Anything further on item 2, the Division Manager, the Manager of Finance and Manager Health and Development's report? Nothing further, we'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Councillor, we're moving on to item 3, development application change of use. 138 Dubbo Street. We note that Councillor Taylor has left the meeting after declaring a non-pecuniary interest. So this is for council's determination, is it, the way that I'm reading this one? Yep.
Which will be an automatic planning division.
Yep.
So for new councillors, Gary, could you show what actually happens? What will happen is that there will have to be a show of hands at the end, and your name will be put either for or against whatever is resolved.
So on page 10, councillors, of your business paper in this report, there is a recommendation. And that recommendation is that information received is noted and they're developing application for the change of use from a hotel to a shop on lot 2 at 138 Dubbo Street Line is approved with the following conditions. And you will see all those prescribed conditions. To get us in order, I think we probably need someone to move a recommendation, then we could have some questions to manage the development and provide. Councillor Kinsey's happy to move that. Councillor Garrett, I saw your hand as the second. Councillor Kinsey.
Well, I think we've got to discuss this. I think it's pretty silly, but it's free enterprise, so there you go.
Might defer to the Manager of Health and Development just for a comment or two on what we have in front of us here. And we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under the local environmental plan, it is considered a retail use in the retail zone, and therefore to demonstrate refusal you'd have to be with very, very strong case, which I don't believe doesn't have grounds for. So if it was challenged in the Land and Environment Court, I don't believe you would have a case.
Thank you for that. Succinct report, but yeah, I understand. You really have, from an LEP point of view, very little grounds on which to have an objection. It's the way I'm understanding what you're saying.
Correct, yes.
Mr. Mayor, could the manager also just explain in summary the conditions that you're requiring on the applicant?
Yep, so the conditions that have been applied, that have been recommended as part of the recommended approval, some are standard mandatory things, but the ones that are of interest is disabled access, fire services, and also the accommodation use of the upstairs portion of the building, to continue it as a tourism, only tourist and visitor accommodation to be permitted, and not residential accommodation. So they're two different uses, and that's been detailed in the report, to ensure that obviously that is under the planning controls what it is intended for in that land use zone, if that makes sense.
So, through the Mayor, to your manager, health and services, if it opens as a shop and the workers, employees, they're not allowed to stay upstairs?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, depending on, you'd have to demonstrate whether it's short-term or long-term, and you'd have to gain your evidence off that basis.
So what's short-term and what's long-term?
Yep. So yeah, it becomes a compliance issue, and you would have to investigate the matter and build a case. So tourist and visitor accommodation is just that, tourist and visitor. So if they're residential on more of a permanent basis, then that's a distinguishing factor.
For you, Mayor. So it could be in some way envisaged or determined as being a motel?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, correct.
Hotel accommodation.
Yeah, something like nice blowing through town type of thing.
Correct.
Which is what we want, we want it to continue. It really is for a change of use for part of the facility, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Councillor Burrow.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the existing fire arrangements, are they inadequate? Or is this placing an additional requirement on that building to comply with the fire regulations? Or are we just covering bases here? And if they are required to upgrade something, why weren't they in place before?
Okay, so through you, Mr. Mayor, the legislation is written in a way that you can make an existing building upgrade. However, because there's expenses involved, you normally work out an agreed plan to get to the end goal. So for example, if it's a new building, it has to fully comply. If it's an older building, you need to demonstrate compliance and save lives in another means or way to achieve that performance, if that makes sense. So it might be additional fire extinguishers, or additional exits or whatever it may be. But because the building is involving approval for a change of use, at that point in time, we can actually require a full upgrade for that portion of the building that's changed of use.
And do you have an estimate of the cost for that? Is there...
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I do not.
Is it reasonably expensive?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe so, no.
And one more question, please. The disabled access that's not there now but needs to be in place, do you have any feeling for whether these additional costs are going to be prohibitive to opening that business, or will they be, you know, reasonable for the upgrades?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I can't speculate on costs, sorry. I have no idea.
We should have some idea of the complexity of the upgrades that are required, because we've got the requirements in here. Is that fair?
That's correct, yes. Yeah.
So in your estimation, I'm just trying to get an idea of, you know, are we putting a barrier in front of this business, or are we genuinely trying to allow the business to open? Who determines what disabled access is compliant and not? That's yours, yeah?
That's correct, yes. Yeah.
So after, if this passes, then you go and speak to the prospective owners and say, okay, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
And that's based on what, how do you determine whether enough access is enough, for example?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it is legislated, that it has to make an Australian standard, but it comes back to their builder on the design. So I don't know if they're going to install timber doors or glass doors or,
Awesome.
yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Kenzie?
Through the Mr. Mayor, is that disabled access, does it include the upstairs apartment?
Through you, Mr Mayor, no, it does not.
And it won't, Mr Mayor, you have to use the building envelope for disabled access. Won't use the street, the footpath. It has to be the land. That's been our council practice for many years. You can't have all your ramps out on footpath. It actually has to be in the building envelope, the land.
Councillor Walker, you got a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just go back to the fire safety. So you're saying they have to upgrade the downstairs. So is it, where people stay upstairs, is that compliant with fire safety?
Through you, Mr Mayor, it's not fully compliant, it's partially compliant, and I did work towards achieving compliance to a satisfactory standard, because you can't upgrade the building because it becomes cost prohibitive. So if it's a new building, you would have fire-rated walls between each room, whereas you can't make an upgrade to that standard. So it's a bit of a risk analysis to save lives. So yeah, so I'm comfortable with the level of fire safety from the last inspection carried out on that building for the accommodation. It's quite some time ago now.
I'm just a bit concerned that I don't know how many people can be up there if it's safe, if there's a fire, if they're safe. Is that part of you know, that you have to go and revisit that and see?
Yes, it is. Yes.
So there might need to be changes upstairs and so?
Possibly, yes.
Councillor Kenzie?
I believe, Mr. Mayor, that the licence has, the liquor licence has actually left the building and gone elsewhere. Is that correct?
Mr Mayor, not to our checks.
There are various stories, for want of a better term, floating around, Councillor Kenzie.
Yeah,
I'm not aware of any truth in that's actually left that building, but I'll stand very much corrected.
If we allow this, new business to be created, does that give premise for the licence to leave? I'm just trying to get my head around, if we don't get the decision, then that liquor licence leaves the county. Is that a danger of what could happen?
Councillor,
I like to know the consequences of my decision on this matter.
That's, yeah. I understand where you're going.
Through you, Mr Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah, so my checks last night was that the licence status as ceased to trade. Doesn't appear that the licence has been transferred to another premise from my investigations. And I don't know what ceased to trade actually entitles the licensee holder. Yeah, that's the status of the licence to my knowledge today.
Okay. Councillor Jackson, and then Councillor Derrick, sorry. Councillor Jackson.
It was reported in the media when there was an interview of the new owner, and he advised the media that he only purchased the premises, that the licence was not available for purchase. So his options for running a business out of those premises were the options that he had chosen, that is a grocery / supermarket, and that he was unable to trade as a pub because he does not have a liquor licence.
Name Larry subject. Now it's been classified as ceased to trade. Our information so far is it hasn't been transferred anywhere.
Councillor Derrick, do you have a comment, question?
Yes, thank you, through Ms. Mayor. I would just like to acknowledge the feedback that's received. I certainly sympathise with a lot of the points that are raised in those letters, the first letter today. But again, I think I wholeheartedly agree with the advice from the Manager of Health and Development that we don't have any legitimate grounds from any of that to deny this application. And yeah, it's certainly nothing that couldn't be challenged, and we would probably lose out if we were to come up with a reason to not approve. So I think the advice that we've been given is sound, and as unfortunate as it is, I don't think there's any legitimate reason that we can't approve. Anyway, unfortunate, I think there's certainly a lot of community sentimentality that will be impacted by this, but yeah, I'm not sure there's any other way to go without recourse for us.
You know, I think that's probably the important point to make if in fact this development application is approved, that it does comply with the B2 zoning, and we have all but no grounds on which to use that application. Is the way unfortunately might be reading this, and I think that's what the Manager of Development is suggesting.
Can I just make a comment there too? There has been publicly a lot of objection to it either. We've only had two.
Couple, or one.
Yeah, so I think as well, there has been a total outcry.
Okay, any further comments, questions regarding item 3 of the Manager of Health and Development's report there regarding the development application for 138 Dullo Street, Warren, and the change of use of that downstairs area? Now, you note that we, as the gentleman just spoke about, we do have to have a division here, and that means when I ask for show of hands, will be for, and those names will actually be recorded, and against will also be recorded. So we'll put the, have we got the recommendation up the top there, Joe?
Very big line.
Yeah, no, just starting at the information noted about the subject, which conditions, yes, thank you for that. Very good. So the mover and seconder are happy with that, Councillor Kinsey and Councillor Derrick? Yep. Okay, in that case, we'll put that, all those in favour of the development application being approved, please raise your hand. And those against, I'll just have to ask that question in case something's, no, they're nil against. Thank you. We'll ask Councillor Taylor to re-enter the meeting.
Where have gone the other sales club? Could resell some part of the
We know that Councillor Taylor has resumed the meeting following the observation on item 3 of the Major Problem Developments Report. Moving on to item 7 on our agenda, the notice of motions, questions with notice, and item 1 of that, item 7 on our agenda is the inclusion of an acknowledgement of country within the order of business of Council's ordinary, extraordinary, special and committee meetings under the Warren Shire Council Code of Meetings Practice. That was moved by Councillor Jackson. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Brewer. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, everybody. I understand that one of the jobs that we have to do as a council is to review our code of meeting practice. And we are a government body and it is a government meeting, and all levels of government do start with a acknowledgement of country. Even just a simple get-together between departments starts with an acknowledgement of country. I've been attending a lot of webinars. They all start with an acknowledgement of country. That I don't think there's been a single government-related meeting I've attended that doesn't. I personally, talk to members of the community who appreciate the fact that council is proactive in continuous improvement and moving forward and future-proofing what we're doing. I think there's quite a bit of detail in this motion as to why I suggested that we consider it, or I've asked that council consider it. And bearing in mind that we're talking about this as one part of an overall review of the code of meeting practice, I feel there's goodwill to be generated from this. It doesn't actually cost us anything in terms of dollars. It's a good way to connect with segments of the community. And in regards to future-proofing, I just want to finish with commenting that the 2 captains of the secondary school of North Central are both Aboriginal women. One of the primary captains is an Aboriginal girl. Our Warren Young Citizen of the Year, Aboriginal girl. We have councillors, we may have councillors now or in the future with Aboriginal heritage and who have close family and friends who have Aboriginal heritage. I think this is part of custom and normal practice of government in any government environment. So that's why I've suggested this would be a good way to kick off the review of the code of meeting practice.
Thank you.
I propose an amendment to the motion.
Certainly.
I propose an amendment to the motion that states inclusion in the acknowledgement of country within the business of council, extraordinary special committee meetings under the Warren Shire Council Code of Meeting Practice, that this or any other changes be decided after a workshop has been held.
Thanks, Councillor. We have a second of that amendment. Councillor Brewer.
Sorry, I missed some out. What was the main thrust of the change?
Can I speak?
Yes,
I think I've been listening to
just 2 seconds. We might just get it up and then we know exactly what we're talking about.
Mr. Mayor, can we turn the heat down? Turn it up or?
You want it to be a fraction warmer, Councillor. Is that what you're saying?
It does a great job, but it's
The general manager.
Which one should I turn off?
Sorry.
The one, that one.
Unbelievable.
No, just wait while Jody gets his, thing, so we're clear.
Oh, I think it's a technical. Thanks, just bit.
Tidy it up a little bit, I think. That.
And any other proposed changes?
Yeah, just be rid of that there, yes.
That's a review of,
So Jody, get rid of that, this. Get rid of the or and any other proposed changes. Of council's code and meeting practice be considered at a council workshop before being progressed.
Yeah, that's not. I think it just needs to be an and in up there, just very beginning.
Before and,
Yes.
no, that, after any,
In the third line down, Joe, after the code of meeting practice, and then and after the practice,
put an and in front of any.
and any.
Oh, and any.
But there are some proposed changes.
It should be to the code.
You got an intended time frame for the workshop?
Next couple of months. Certainly one. We thought about March, but it might not be possible. Hoping April.
Yeah. So Joe, just change, it's an amendment, so we just need to have a heading there to say amendment. And then, yeah, move forward. Bruce, yeah. And then full stop or whatever after Bruce, and then capital T for that.
That's how.
There you go, so this, yep, and then I'll change it to the inclusion of an acknowledgement. Does that make? Inclusion and acknowledgement of countries within the order of business of councils, ordinary sure that he makes under one entire council's code.
So you can have 1 and 2.
No, just put it all back and just after that, put that the.
Yeah. Yeah.
And little two, put it all. There's not going to have a second.
Okay, right, okay. Speaks inclusion of the country within the order of business. Council ordinary. Councillor Walker, you happy with the wording there?
I'm saying, thank you for your help, but, yeah, and I think it's, and I hear, as I was saying, Councillor Jackson saying, an overall, you know, business proceedings, maybe a workshop would need to be in order, so that we can cover these sorts of things. There's a few councillors that are so that hopefully everyone turns up and they can get in discussion.
Thank you. Speaker. So speaker for, speaker against, or speaker comment or something. Yes.
It's a comment. Just to say, I'm personally happy with that resolution because it's demonstrating to the community that it's on the table and we are willing to consider it. And the community will know eventually whether or not council decides to positively resolve that by what our revised code practice looks like in the end. So thank you.
Thank you. So sorry, is there any further comment, question? Because we'll have to put the amendment first, and then if it's carried, the amendment becomes the motion. So is there any further comment, questions regarding the amendment?
Original order of the amendment.
We have to consider the amendment at the moment. That's what's on the table. Any further comments, questions regarding the amendment?
Councillor Jackson is after someone. Councillor
Jackson, yes. Councillor Jackson, anything further to contribute? So I think we just went through that. So. Any further comments, questions before we put the amendment? Right on the screen. We put that, all those in favour, against, carried. The amendment now becomes the motion.
And was carried, and that becomes the motion.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we have to vote on it again. So now the amendment has become the motion. We now have to actually vote on the motion. Is there any further comments, questions, or discussion before we vote on what has become the motion? Nothing further, we'll put that, all those in favour, against, carried. Thank you. Righto. The committee of the whole closed council meeting. First, we need a resolution to proceed with the committee of the whole council. Consider the matter listed in the main development report, and any other matters require a separate resolution that's been carried during the last meeting. So, is someone happy to resolve and move into the committee of the whole? Thank you, Councillor Kinsey, seconded Councillor Taylor. Put that, all those in favour? Against, carried. We also need a resolution to exclude the press and public from the committee of the whole closed council meeting. Someone says to happy to move that, or Councillor Jackson's happy to move that. Second, Councillor Brewer. We are now in the committee of the whole. Thank you. you, we move back into open council now. So maybe we just move that recommendation again in open council. And so those two proponents, happy to move this, that same motion again in open council. Thank you, Councillor McCloskey, and second was Councillor Kinsey. I don't believe any further discussion required. That being the case, is there any further discussion? In the case, we'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Close the meeting. Yes, we declare the meeting closed and thank you all for your